Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Night Scared. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off, I thought it would be a fun idea if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the case. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. Story 1. On February 26, 2019, a man named Lee Hee-jin reported to the Dongin police station in Anyang City. He was concerned about losing contact with his parents, his 62-year-old father and 58-year-old mother, and sought police assistance in finding them. For those familiar with our previous coverage of South Korean cases, you'll understand the typical approach of the Korean police. They often show minimal concern even for missing children, let alone elderly adults. This case proved no different. The police were notably indifferent to Hee-jin's report. Based on their experience, cases of two elderly people simultaneously going missing were extremely rare. Most elderly missing persons cases were usually misunderstandings or, at worst, medical emergencies while out. However, Hee-jin insisted his parents were in perfect health, with no underlying conditions that could cause sudden death. Even if they were ill, the probability of both falling ill simultaneously was practically impossible. After consideration, the police suggested that Hee-jin's parents had likely just gone on a trip or had some business without informing the family. They told him to wait at home for news. This waiting period stretched over 2 weeks. Finally, on March 16th, still unable to contact his parents, Hee-jin was forced to return to the police station for a second time. This time, the police acted with surprising speed. Just 2 days later, on March 18th, they discovered a horrifying scene at the Hyundai apartment complex in Gwangyang, Dongin District. In a wall cabinet, they found the heavily decomposed body of Soon-ja, Hee-jin's mother. The tragedy didn't end there. That same afternoon, a report came in from rural Pyeongtaek. A local warehouse manager reported an overwhelming stench that villagers had been noticing for days. When they investigated, they found an elderly man's body in a refrigerator. DNA tests later confirmed it was Lee Deok-ju, Hee-jin's father. These two horrifying discoveries on the same day pushed Hee-jin to the brink of collapse. But what shocked him even more was the information in the forensic report. What did this report reveal? Without question, Deok-ju and Soon-ja had been brutally murdered. Their bodies were covered in so many wounds that forensic experts couldn't determine the exact cause of death. This wasn't simply a murder. It was a prolonged torture session that continued until both victims drew their final breaths. The deaths were determined to have occurred on February 25th, just 1 day before Hee-jin first went to the police station. A bitter truth emerged. If the police had taken the initial report seriously, they might have collected more crucial evidence, even though they couldn't have saved the victims. However, the investigators seemed unfazed by this oversight. To them, this appeared to be a typical revenge case. All details pointed in one direction. They believed that by following the victim's social connections, the perpetrator's identity would soon be revealed. The investigation team split into 2 groups, one investigating the area around the crime scenes for potential witnesses, while the other began examining the victims' relationships. Sure enough, near the warehouse where Deok-ju's body was found, several villagers reported possibly seeing the perpetrator. The specific situation was described as follows. On the evening of February 25th, the day of the deaths, there was an unpleasant odor near the warehouse. Some curious villagers followed the smell to investigate. They discovered a strange man burning a bag behind the warehouse. Logically, burning trash in a remote area isn't a major offense. At worst, it might warrant a warning. However, oddly enough, the stranger fled in panic before the villagers could say anything, disappearing almost instantly. Although the villagers found this strange, it was dark and nothing serious seemed to have occurred, so they dismissed it. Looking back, they realized this mysterious man could very well have been the murderer. The villagers told police the man wasn't tall, was somewhat overweight, and judging by his running speed, wasn't very athletic, likely not a local farmer. This lead about the mysterious man was quickly passed to the team investigating the victim's social connections. But a puzzling detail emerged. No one, from family members to neighbors, could recall anyone matching that description. Instead, they all insisted that the Lee couple lived very privately and always treated everyone well. No one could imagine them being involved in such a bloody revenge killing. However, Hee-jin, the victim's son, had a completely different perspective. As soon as he learned about the burned bag, He suggested that police investigate this as a robbery murder. His reason made the investigators jump. On that fateful morning of February 25th, Hee-jin had just sold his Bugatti Veyron and had given his parents 500 million won, about $400,000, in cash in a bag for safekeeping. Just hours later, they were brutally murdered. And now, a stranger was caught burning a suspicious bag. Could this really be just a coincidence? Upon learning this information, police immediately researched the couple's apartment. The investigation results further supported Hee-jin's theory. There was no trace of the 500 million won or the bag containing it. Checking the victim's bank accounts revealed no unusual transactions involving such a large sum. All signs pointed to this being a premeditated robbery. Notably, information about Hee-jin selling his car was known to very few people, suggesting the perpetrator was likely someone familiar with the family. However, another strange detail caught the investigators' attention. Why did the killer preserve Mr. Deokja's body in a refrigerator in a rural Pyeongtaek warehouse, while leaving Mrs. Sunja's body to decompose naturally in the apartment wall cabinet in Anyang? Perhaps this wasn't simply a robbery. This situation could be explained in several ways. Maybe the killer acted alone and couldn't transport both bodies, or the vehicle was too small, or perhaps they intended to move both, but encountered an unexpected situation. However, the Korean investigators proposed a bolder theory. They suggested that leaving Sunja's body to decompose naturally wasn't random. It could have been intentional revenge. Compared to Deokju, it seemed the killer harbored a deeper hatred for Sunja. All clues pointed to one conclusion. The killer must be someone familiar who had a personal vendetta against Sunja. But just then, an investigator noticed a major contradiction in the entire story. He asked his colleagues, "When you heard about Hee-jin selling his supercar, didn't you notice something? He must be extremely wealthy. So why sell the car at this time?" When asked about the reason for selling the car, Hee-jin casually replied, "I have many nice cars." Selling a Bugatti Veyron was simply getting rid of excess. Nothing special. This seemed to be the issue. If Hee-jin was that wealthy, why were his parents living in such an ordinary apartment? In previous cases, whenever wealthy people lived so discreetly, it was usually to hide something. So, was this family concealing some unspeakable secret? With this in mind, the investigator checked the Lee family's background. The findings were startling. The Lee couple didn't just have Hee-jin as their only child. Hee-jin had an older brother named Hee-moon. As soon as this name was mentioned, the scattered pieces of the case began falling into place. To the investigators, the fact that Hee-moon's parents became victims of a massacre seemed almost unsurprising. Wondering why? Let me tell you the story behind Hee-moon's name. From October 2008, South Korea fell into an economic crisis that pushed many citizens into financial hardship. During this time, many people turned to the stock market and investment funds as a lifeline, hoping to find a source of income to improve their lives. Hee-moon emerged as a rising star. He quickly earned glamorous titles in the financial world. The Warren Buffett of Korea, Cheongdam's #1 stock trader, Korea's most experienced investment master. His reputation grew rapidly in Seoul's financial circles. By 2014, Lee Hee-moon's name had spread beyond investment circles. He became a familiar face on major media outlets, from the Korean Economic Channel to various television stations. Lee Hee-moon had built a perfect image of a businessman, young, talented, and dazzlingly wealthy. Hee-moon claimed to have graduated from the English Literature Department of a prestigious private university in Seoul. During his college years, he said his exceptional tutoring skills earned him about 5 million won, about $4,000 monthly. However, due to his sharp financial mind after graduation, he didn't pursue an English-related career, but went straight into investing. As a result, he achieved a dramatic class jump in less than 10 years. Not only did he buy a mansion in Seoul's wealthy Gangnam district with cash, but he also owned luxury vehicles including Bugatti, Lamborghini, Rolls-Royce, and Bentley. But all of this wasn't what really caught ordinary people's attention. What truly made Hee-moon notable was his apparent dedication to helping common people, freely sharing his investment expertise. He regularly shared his investment secrets on television shows and even helped manage finances for some devoted followers. Just imagine, if a renowned, wealthy, successful person offered to manage your finances, wouldn't you jump at the opportunity? As word spread, many people wanted Hee-moon to help them make money. Faced with this rising investment wave, he reluctantly opened an investment consulting company to handle these matters. For more cautious investors who preferred to trade themselves, He-moon generously shared lists of guaranteed profitable stocks. The Lee family quickly turned this opportunity into gold when younger brother, He-jin, established a P2P lending company to help those who wanted to invest but lacked funds. In a brief period, the brothers accumulated a massive fortune of over 20 billion won, about $16 million. But behind the glamour of a stock market mogul lay a dark truth no one expected. All investors who trusted him gradually fell into complete bankruptcy. When some victims became aware and began investigating He-moon, they discovered a shocking truth. His entire background was fabricated. Not a single detail of his past was real. For instance, he claimed to have graduated from a prestigious university, but in reality, he had never even attended college. His social media posts flaunting his wealth were all fabricated. He claimed he was about to become the distributor for Lamborghini and Bugatti in South Korea. Upon verification, due to South Korea's small market size, Lamborghini had never considered establishing a new distributor there. Even more outrageous was when in summer 2016, He-moon posted on Facebook claiming he had just landed at an airport in China and was preparing to have dinner with a high-ranking official from Jiangsu province. At the time, almost no one questioned this, only feeling impressed by He-moon's connections. It wasn't until he was caught and imprisoned for fraud and illegal trading that this story resurfaced online. Chinese authorities were forced to deny the claims, stating that Jiangsu had no such official that He-moon had mentioned. Moreover, the Chinese airport photo he posted was simply downloaded from the internet. In short, the entire post was his fabrication. And so, He-moon's empire completely collapsed. Unfortunately, the investors he deceived collapsed with him. Thousands of people lost their entire investments, and many were left with enormous debts. Some victims, unable to cope, tragically ended their lives in despair. One could imagine that if He-moon hadn't been imprisoned, he might have been killed by his victims. Therefore, it wasn't surprising that some people, unable to take revenge on him directly, might turn their anger towards his parents. However, if this was truly the case, solving the crime would be extremely difficult, because He-moon had deceived so many people. Just as the police were struggling with this dilemma, the officer who had earlier discovered the contradiction proposed an idea. The reporter, He-jin, had been concealing his brother's identity to hide their past and hadn't told the police about his brother. Now that this veil had been lifted, there was no need for secrecy anymore. Perhaps now he would share more useful information for solving the case. This officer's intuition proved correct. When investigators frankly confronted the truth, He-jin indeed revealed more information, like a dam breaking. He disclosed that after his brother He-moon went to prison, although they had returned some illegal funds, the family still retained significant cash and assets. This was why they had to live discreetly, avoiding attention from curious eyes. Moreover, since his brother had been in prison for some time, he initially didn't think his parents' deaths were related to this matter. In short, he was just trying to justify why he hadn't previously disclosed everything. After these meaningless explanations, He-jin mentioned something strange that made people think. On February 25th, the night of the murders, he had received a message from his mother on a messaging app. His mother said she had just met a successful Harvard graduate businessman named Kim Young-ho and wanted He-jin to arrange time to meet him to discuss potential business cooperation. So, He-jin had added Young-ho as a contact and planned to chat online first with the intention of meeting in person if there was potential for cooperation. Unexpectedly, during their conversation, He-jin accidentally clicked the video call button and the other party connected. At that moment, He-jin caught a glimpse of Young-ho's round, full face. Initially, this seemed like a perfectly normal occurrence. But the strange thing was, hadn't forensics determined that both victims were murdered on the evening of February 25th? How could Sunja have sent messages to He-jin? At this point, there were only two possibilities. Either forensics had incorrectly determined the time of death, or the person messaging He-jin was the killer. If it was the latter, this self-proclaimed Kim Young-ho could very well be the murderer. The attempt to meet He-jin might have been intended to kill him too, with revenge against the family as the motive. Therefore, police immediately created a sketch based on He-jin's description and showed it to the villagers who had seen the suspect. Everyone agreed that the person in the sketch looked quite similar to the mysterious man who had burned the bag near the warehouse on the night of the murders. With the suspect's appearance and build now identified, police used this information to check surveillance cameras around the crime scene. They quickly spotted the suspect in street camera footage. When analyzing the surveillance video carefully, investigators discovered a crucial detail. The suspect didn't act alone, but had 3 accomplices. However, due to poor image quality, police could only identify and arrest the mastermind, Kim Dae-yoon, the person who had impersonated Kim Young-ho to approach the victim's family through the messaging app. Contrary to investigators' expectations of a hardened criminal, Dae-yoon proved quite forthcoming. Immediately after his arrest, he admitted to all his crimes and willingly revealed his motives. But the story he told was even more shocking than his crimes. As police had suspected, Dae-yoon was one of Hee-moon's countless victims. However, unlike most of those who were deceived, he wasn't an ordinary victim. Dae-yoon came from a privileged background, having completed both his bachelor's and master's degrees in the United States. Afterward, he successfully established a yacht rental company there and thrived for many years. Until August 2017, when tragedy struck, his business failed, his marriage fell apart, forcing him to return to South Korea. After returning home, Dae-yoon planned to use his remaining assets to rebuild his career, continuing the yacht rental business in the Gyeonggi area. Unexpectedly, he happened to meet Hee-moon. Since Dae-yoon was looking for investors at the time, Hee-moon, with his wealth and influence, became someone he wanted to impress. As a result, he not only participated in Hee-moon's financial projects, but even gave Hee-moon's father 20 million won, about $16,000, as spending money. Finally, with Hee-moon's collapse, Dae-yoon, who had returned from America hoping to rebuild his life, was also scammed into complete bankruptcy. But since Hee-moon was already sentenced to prison, Dae-yoon couldn't take revenge on him directly and decided to target his family instead. However, due to Dae-yoon's poor physical condition, to ensure safety, he claimed to have hired 3 young Korean Chinese men online. Dae-yoon stated that these 3 men were the who actually killed the elderly Lee couple, while he only handled planning and crime scene cleanup. Immediately after the murders, the 3 accomplices allegedly flew back to Jilin Province, China. Although this temporarily prevented South Korean police from arresting all suspects, it didn't affect their determination of Dae-yoon as the primary perpetrator. Therefore, logically, the next step would be the standard trial process. But what investigators didn't expect was that when detailed information about the murders of the elderly Lee couple was reported by the media, it sparked major controversy. Instead of condemning Dae-yoon's brutal actions, the South Korean public unanimously voiced support and called for the court to reduce his punishment. This strange reaction led many to question. No matter how despicable Hee-moon was, his parents were innocent, so how could the Korean public be so blind? But the truth behind this reaction was even more shocking. Hee-moon's financial empire was actually a family business, where each member played a role in the fraud scheme. His parents weren't merely innocent bystanders, but actively participated in management. Particularly Soon-ja, the supposedly innocent mother, regularly appeared on her son's paid channel, using her image as a respectable mother to persuade and lure people into investing in the stocks their family promoted. After the scheme was exposed, Soon-ja was also convicted, but only received a suspended sentence and a fine of 50 million won, about $40,000. Simply put, the elderly couple were accomplices to their son's crimes. However, when faced with public criticism online, the couple not only didn't apologize but coldly declared that no one in all of South Korea studies stocks as seriously as our son, implying that convicting Hee-moon of fraud was unjust. Now, you understand why public opinion sided with Dae-yoon, don't you? Just when the case seemed to be reaching its conclusion, an unexpected twist emerged. The 3 Korean Chinese accomplices, after returning to China, suddenly posted shocking accusations about Dae-yoon. If Hee-moon was a financial fraudster, Dae-yoon was even more vicious. He deceived people to take lives. Dae-yoon's previous statements about being only the mastermind, while the other 3 were the direct perpetrators, suddenly collapsed. These 3 individuals revealed the frightening truth behind the murders. Everything began about a month before the tragedy, when Dae-yoon posted a job listing for security guards online. The 3 young men were attracted by promises of an easy job with attractive pay, applied, and were quickly hired. But when they completed all procedures and made the long journey to South Korea, Dae-yoon's first request wasn't normal security work. It was the horrifying task of transporting 2 elderly corpses to a remote warehouse in the countryside. Fortunately, these 3 young men weren't foolish. When they discovered they were transporting corpses, they immediately refused Dae-yoon's request and fled back to their country. In other words, The three supposed accomplices were actually laborers whom Daeun had lured from China to South Korea, and they were completely innocent in the massacre. All crimes were committed by him alone. However, South Korean police couldn't hastily believe these accusations. While requesting China's cooperation in extraditing the three men, they thoroughly investigated the group's movements during their time in South Korea. What they discovered supported the three men's testimonies. None of them had received any money from Daeun. In fact, one of them had to borrow 200,000 won, about $160, from local friends just to buy a plane ticket home. This detail completely contradicted Daeun's claim about hiring them to commit murder. But this discovery led to a bigger question. If Kim Daeun had lied about these three men's roles, was his entire previous confession reliable? Were there other secrets behind the case waiting to be revealed? Following this line of investigation, sure enough, even the revenge killing story was a lie. Daeun had committed this crime for different reasons. For over a year prior, he had posed as a private detective to approach victims of Imun's fraud, particularly those who had gone to his house to demand compensation, and indirectly gathered information about the current personnel structure and financial situation of Imun's family. He even stalked the parents, installing tracking devices and wiretaps in their car. Moreover, as mentioned earlier, on the morning of the murders, Hee-jin had given his parents 500 million won from selling the car, and this money eventually disappeared. Some might think that taking the money while seeking revenge was convenient. Why waste it? The issue was the timing was too precise. Could this really be coincidental? Later, police discovered a crucial detail. Hee-jin's Bugatti Veyron had actually sold for 1.5 billion won, about $1.2 million. He had given his parents 500 million won, keeping 1 billion won, about $800,000 for himself. His parents knew about this. If his parents knew, then Daeun could have known through his wiretapping devices. That's why after the murders, he immediately tried to meet Hee-jin. The purpose was likely to steal the remaining 1 billion won. While coordinating to meet Hee-jin in person, Daeun was also in contact with a broker to prepare for an escape to the Philippines at any moment. Putting everything together, police concluded that Daeun was the sole perpetrator of this crime, and his true motive was robbery. Consequently, the Suwon Supreme Court indicted Kim Daeun on multiple charges including robbery, murder, corpse disposal, and illegal trespassing. He was ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment in the first trial. Although he appealed in 2021, the Supreme Court rejected his appeal and upheld the original sentence. Notably, by this time, Hee-moon, who had been convicted of fraud, had been released after serving his prison term. Logically, several years in prison and his parents' horrific deaths should have taught him a lesson and led him to reform his life. Unexpectedly, after laying low for a while, Hee-moon resurfaced and began using Bitcoin to commit fraud. After his crimes were discovered, he was arrested again in September 2023. However, this time, he was quickly released on bail. Perhaps the most bitter aspect of this story is that after his release from prison, Lee Hee-moon seemed unaffected by his dark past and his parents' deaths. Using his remaining wealth, he married a female idol, built a family, and enjoyed a luxurious lifestyle. This case isn't just a tragedy about greed and revenge, but also a warning about how people can lose their humanity for money. Some commit fraud without remorse, others readily kill for robbery, leaving permanent scars on society. Story 2. July 12, 1994 in the morning, Zhao Dafu, a construction worker from Jiangku village in Yongxing Town, Dazhou City, Sichuan Province, China, went to work as usual. He returned home alone that evening to find his wife Xiao Shuaqin and their 2 sons missing. Initially, Dafu assumed his wife had taken the children to visit her parents. However, the next day his neighbor, Mrs. Ma, shared some strange news. Mrs. Ma explained that Shuaqin had borrowed a pair of white plastic sandals from her the previous morning, saying she planned to go to the market. The children, not wanting to stay home, had insisted on accompanying their mother. After hearing this, Dafu instinctively thought his wife must have taken the children to stay at her parents' house after shopping. He quickly ate breakfast and cycled to his in-laws' home. By noon, despite asking everywhere and checking with relatives and friends, Dafu couldn't find any trace of his family. A sense of foreboding began to grow. Worried, Dafu went to the town market to inquire. The locals there said they hadn't seen Shuaqin or the 2 boys anywhere. At this point, a Jiangku villager named Gao Yuankue provided crucial information. Gao said that on the day Shuaqin disappeared, she had also gone to the town market. On her way home, she had encountered Dafu's two sons, Zhao Yongyong and Zhao Yongquan. The brothers were sitting on a bench by the road. Gao recognized them and invited them to return to Jiangku village together. But the older brother Yongyong said they were waiting for their mother to return. So Gao left and went back to the village. Following Gao's description, Dafu and some relatives went to the market to find the spot where the two brothers had stopped. Although they didn't discover anything unusual, some nearby households raised their suspicions. According to village rumors, these families had members previously involved in child abductions. Therefore, Dafu and others suspected that Shua Qin and the children might have been kidnapped. After receiving Zhao Dafu's report, local police investigated these households. The most suspicious among them was a man named Pu Jijin, commonly known as Pu Sanwa by locals. Unfortunately, when police searched Pu's entire house, they found no related evidence or traces. This investigation result deeply disappointed Dafu. He still couldn't understand why his wife and children had suddenly vanished. Without evidence of kidnapping, local police could only investigate the case as a voluntary disappearance. However, since people leaving their homes was quite common in rural Dazhou at that time, the local police station couldn't allocate sufficient resources to search for Shua Qin and the children. Since his family's disappearance, Dafu lost all focus on work. Cycling around searching for them became his primary concern each morning. In his worried and disappointed state, Zhao Dafu even suspected his in-laws might be hiding his family. However, Xiao Shuaqin's family was equally worried. According to Shuaqin's sister, their family had also searched many times. As her sister, she dreamed of Shuaqin's return even in her sleep. After more than 2 months of searching, Dafu fell into complete despair. He spent his days drinking to dull the pain, but the heartache wouldn't subside. Devastated by the sudden loss of her grandchildren, Dafu's mother fell ill and passed away 6 months later. Dafu's father was equally heartbroken, visiting places where his grandchildren used to play daily, hoping to find traces of them. Unfortunately, he fell from a small bridge one day, suffering severe internal injuries that ultimately led to his death. A once peaceful family was suddenly shattered by an unexpected tragedy. As time passed, Dafu gradually accepted that he might never find his wife and children. In his family genealogy book, he made 2 notations about the disappearances. For his eldest son Yongyong, 1994, taken by mother and disappeared. For his younger son Yongquan, 1994, taken by mother and disappeared. However, one morning after 18 years, Dafu unexpectedly received a call from the local police station. The police informed him they might have found his eldest son. Dafu felt both confused and emotional. On September 8, 2012, while working as a laborer in Guangzhou, Guangdong province, Dafu's phone was constantly ringing with calls from relatives. After receiving news about his son, the usually frugal Dafu immediately bought a plane ticket and returned to his hometown in Sichuan. At the Yongxingtown police station in Kaijiang County, Sichuan province, Dafu met a Dafu and his family were convinced that Shuyang was Dafu's biological son, as his face strongly resembled Dafu's, while his chin was identical to his mother Shua Qin's. Finally, DNA test results confirmed their suspicions. The young man named Shuyang was indeed Yongyong, Dafu's son, who had been missing for 18 years. However, according to records, Yongyong was only 7 years old when he disappeared and had few memories of his hometown. How did he find his way back? Where had he been for 18 years? And what had happened to his mother Shua Qin and younger brother Yongquan? According to Yongyong's recollections, that afternoon, 18 years ago, he and his brother had followed their mother to the Yongxingtown market. Then, a man from a roadside shop waved to Mother Shua Qin, and she followed him inside. Yongyong and his brother Yongquan sat on a bench outside the shop, playing while waiting for their mother to return. Soon after, loud music began playing from inside the shop, making the brothers curious enough to go in. There, they witnessed their mother being pinned to the ground by a man. Yongyong recalled seeing another man take out a syringe and inject something into their mother's head. At this point, their mother struggled fiercely, but the man holding her down pulled out a sharp knife and stabbed her repeatedly in the back. In the following days, the two brothers were kept in a dark basement under the shop. Although Yongyong tried to escape with his brother through a window, they were caught when they reached the courtyard wall. Yongyong couldn't remember much of what happened next. He only recalled being put on a train. Because the journey was very long, he assumed they had been taken somewhere far away. They eventually arrived in a rural area of Putian City, Fujian Province. After a few days, his brother Yongquan was taken away by a man and never returned. Yong was soon taken to another man's house, named Su Jinchi, who became his adoptive father. To conceal his identity, Jinchi gave Yong a new name, Su Yang. However, as Su Yang grew older, he discovered Jinchi wasn't his biological father. He couldn't remember his birth father's name, but recalled that his father used to wear a suit and ride a bicycle to work, while his mother was a hard-working and skilled woman who cooked well and worked in the fields, and they also raised pigs. Their life was simple but warm. Regarding his real name, Su Yang said he only remembered his nickname, Yong. Since becoming aware of his situation, Su Yang's desire to find his birth parents grew stronger. He kept a precious diary, with its most prominent page covered in photos from childhood to adulthood, documenting his deep longing for his family. From 2000 to 2005, Su Yang specifically preserved these portrait photos, hoping to reunite with his birth parents one day. According to Su Yang, after graduating from middle school, his adoptive father sent him to apprentice at a gemstone workshop in Guangdong Province. Initially, Su Yang earned only 300 yuan, about $45 per month, not enough for rent, forcing him to survive on 2 yuan, about 30-cent noodles once a day. He lived in daily suffering, not knowing how many more years it would take to find his birth parents and brother. To find traces of his mother and brother, he drew his childhood memories, including details of his mother's abuse. Though somewhat hazy, the horrific scene remained vivid in his mind. About 3 years later, his adoptive father Jinsi returned to his hometown in Fujian, while Su Yang stayed alone in Sihui City, Guangdong Province, continuing to work. He saved money while secretly traveling to Jiangsu, Hubei, and Hunan provinces, trying to recover memories of his hometown. Although Su Yang covered his rented room's walls with photos of cities, memories of his hometown remained elusive. During the 2012 Chinese New Year, Su Yang accompanied a friend to Longchang County, Neijiang City, Sichuan Province. While dining at his friend's home, 2 dishes suddenly triggered some memories. Su Yang said the Chinese sausage and watercress reminded him of his childhood hometown flavors. He immediately realized his birth parents might be from Sichuan Province. After determining this general direction, Su Yang registered on the Baby Come Home website. However, his story shocked the website's volunteers, and its authenticity was initially questioned by the online community. When registering, he used the name Zhao Yong, vaguely remembering his surname was Zhao or Chow. His name contained Zhao, but he couldn't remember his mother's name anymore. To help the volunteers, Su Yang drew his hometown based on scattered memories. In the picture, he depicted dragon boat racing during the festival, his deepest childhood memory. Additionally, Su Yang drew some scenes from his hometown. According to his memories, his old house was next to his second aunt's house. There was a bamboo forest beside the old house. Behind the house were 2 ponds. As a child, he often fell into them, getting covered in mud. Another vivid memory was a small bridge not far from their house, which he crossed every day to school. Under the bridge was a small stream where he and his brother often caught fish and crabs. Based on these memory clues, volunteers began searching for missing person information across Sichuan. However, 18 years had passed since Su Yang's kidnapping, and many places in Sichuan had undergone massive changes. It was truly challenging for volunteers to find the exact location based on 18-year-old scenery. To better recall his hometown memories, volunteers took Su Yang to Sichuan to visit several locations. According to Su Yang's memory as a child, he often heard his mother mention a place called Gao Street, which left a deep impression on him. Based on these clues, volunteers found a location, Beigao Town in Dazhou City, Sichuan. Along the way, volunteers asked everywhere. They questioned local residents about whether they had heard of a case where a mother and 2 sons disappeared in the early 1990s. Unfortunately, people there all said they had never heard of such a case. Later, volunteers and Su Yang visited the Beigao Village Committee and police station. Although local staff were very helpful, they still couldn't find any family with similar circumstances. After 7 days of continuous searching, Su Yang and the volunteers had covered all of Dazhou City. Each morning they set out full of hope, only to return disappointed in the evening. Since the search for relatives showed no progress, Su Yang dejectedly returned to Putian City, Fujian Province. He hoped to get some clues about his kidnapping from his adoptive father, Jinsi. At this moment, a middle-aged woman from Kaijiang County, Sichuan province, suddenly called the volunteers. This phone call would uncover a secret buried for 18 years. The caller was Xiao Xieying, a resident of Kaijiang County and mother of 2 boys. One afternoon in mid-October 1993, her eldest son Wang Xiang mysteriously disappeared after school. Afterward, Xieying and her husband searched everywhere and reported to the police, but found no clues. For over a decade, she never gave up searching for her son, Xiang. While working away from home, besides regularly following missing person news, she also contacted Baby Come Home website staff and local Sichuan volunteers. In early September 2012, Xiao Xieying saw the article about Su Yang searching for his family. She thought it might be her son, Xiang, and called the volunteers. However, after several inquiries, both parties realized that the Su Yang seeking relatives in the news might be the son of a Zhao family from Yongxing town. Learning this, the volunteers became very excited. They immediately contacted the Yongxing town police station and confirmed that in Jinko village, there indeed was a Zhao family who had lost 3 family members years ago. Then, the police went to Dafu's house. At that time, his sister said that after seeing the photo in the newspaper, she immediately believed the young man in the picture could be her brother's long-lost son, Yongyang. On September 11, 2012, in Jinko village, Yongxing town, people gathered at the village entrance to welcome Yongyang home. After nearly 2 hours of waiting, Yongyang finally appeared at the village entrance with the volunteers. Although firecrackers exploded loudly on both sides of the village road, Yongyang's tears wouldn't stop flowing. Facing his aged father and villagers, he was speechless. His tears seemed to say everything. After completing the family reunion ceremony, Dafu led Yongyang into a room and sat down. He took out 2 old photographs that had been carefully preserved for years and showed them to his son. Looking at the childhood photos with his mother and brother, Yongyang couldn't hold back his tears. Although the reunion atmosphere was emotional, Dafu had one question he dared not ask Yongyang. After calming down from the emotional reunion, Dafu finally gathered the courage to ask the question that concerned him most. He asked his son, "How did your mother leave back then?" Yongyang seemed to have anticipated this question, so he took out the drawings he had made and told his father about the horrific scene from 18 years ago. After hearing Yongyang's account, Dafu was silent for a few seconds, then said in a deep, determined voice, "Son, I will definitely find your brother and mother. This is my only wish now." Therefore, that afternoon, Dafu took Yongyang to the Kaijian County Police Bureau to file a report. Based on Yongyang's account and some materials he provided, the police officers in charge first confirmed the truth about his kidnapping. However, to reconstruct the details of the horrific case from 18 years ago, the police still needed to find more criminal evidence. Since Mother Shuachin and brother Yongquan were still missing and their survival status unknown, the police decided to first investigate Yongyang's kidnappers to trace the entire case. On September 13, 2012, the Kaijian County Police Bureau sent 2 investigators with Yongyang to Putian City, Fujian Province. In a village called Hoji in Putian City, Kaijian police found Yongyang's adoptive father and asked about the kidnappers from that year. However, Jinchi was very cold, saying it had been at least 20 years since he'd seen that kidnapper, and he no longer remembered what he looked like. Faced with Jinchi's resolute non-cooperation, the case officers felt very helpless. Therefore, Yongyang decided to ask other villagers. As a result, most villagers also spoke ambiguously, clearly unwilling to reveal information about the kidnapper. The 2 investigators had to turn to the local police station, requesting them to dispatch officers to assist in the investigation. According to Yongyang's recollection, he had stayed in another man's house for some time before his adoptive father took him home. But Yongyang didn't know where this man lived or his name. He only remembered the man's house had a loft, with something like a temple shrine upstairs. At that time, Yongyang was locked in the loft, and he saw villagers frequently coming to burn incense and worship. To find the kidnapper's specific location, local police called Jinchi in for questioning again. This time, Jinchi clearly showed more cooperation with the investigation. According to his recollection, that year a middleman named Ahei had approached him, saying there was a child about 6 or 7 years old in nearby Gaoyang village, asking if he wanted to adopt. Then Jinchi had followed this middleman to another man's house. Jinchi said he paid a total of 5,800 yuan, about $850, and took Yongyang away. However, unfortunately, This middleman had now developed age-related memory loss and couldn't provide any more related clues. Therefore, police had to take Jinchi to Gaoyang village in Beigao town to point out the kidnapper's residence. According to Jinchi's recollection, the kidnapper was named Wang Jianhe, a local from Gaoyang village. Compared to that year, although Gaoyang village had undergone many significant changes, after searching house by house, Su Jinchi finally led police to Wang Jianhe's house. Over the years, Wang Jianhe's house had been rebuilt into a multi-story building, but the small temple shrine upstairs remained almost identical to its arrangement from 18 years ago. However, faced with police questioning, Wang Jianhe only admitted to Yongyang being adopted by Su Jinchi that year. Regarding the kidnapping, he chose to remain silent. To find a breakthrough, the investigating officers decided to first investigate Wang Jianhe's social relationships. They quickly made a rather surprising discovery. Through investigation, police learned that Wang's wife was also from Kaijiang County, Sichuan Province, and had also been kidnapped and brought here, growing up before marrying Wang. According to her statement, over 20 years ago, a man nicknamed Pian Naokai had kidnapped her. Later, she witnessed other children being brought to Wang's house multiple times. Through further investigation, police quickly identified the real name of this Pian Naokai as Zheng Jixian, 58 years old, from Xinyang Town, the same hometown as Yongyang. Related documents showed that Zheng Jixian had previously been sentenced to 6 years in prison by the Kaijiang County People's Court for child kidnapping. Sentenced with him were 2 other accomplices, one of whom was Pu Sanhua, the man Dafu had suspected of kidnapping his wife and children. Based on this connection, Kaijiang police believed Zheng and Pu were likely the perpetrators who kidnapped the 2 brothers Yongyang that year. Therefore, after interrogating Wang, police quickly arrested Zheng. Simultaneously, they also quickly went to Pu's house. He was now 51 years old. During initial questioning, Pu quickly admitted that the kidnapping of the 2 brothers Yongyang that year was indeed his doing. However, regarding the whereabouts of Shua Qin, Yongyang's mother, he still hadn't confessed the truth. He only revealed the 3rd suspect was Liao Dingji. To quickly apprehend Liao, police immediately went to his residence for a surprise arrest. However, unexpectedly, the cunning Liao Dingji had caught wind of the news and fled beforehand. According to Pu's confession, Liao was actually his blood brother. Although adopted into the Liao family from childhood, he had always maintained an unbreakable relationship with the Pu family. Therefore, after searching all the Liao family's connections, police went to Pu relatives' homes in the neighboring town. Sure enough, they found Liao hiding there. In the interrogation room, Liao honestly told investigators, "I want to ask for the government's leniency. I'm willing to confess all crimes." Then, Liao detailed the entire criminal process from 18 years ago. The time went back to early July 1994. Due to financial difficulties, Liao had gone to Pu's house to borrow money. Unexpectedly, Pu once again proposed the kidnapping plan they had contemplated many times before. Pu told Liao that kidnapping a child could earn them several thousand yuan, and this money also sparked Liao's evil intentions. According to Pu's plan, Liao was responsible for observing targets on the street, then luring them to his shop before taking action. However, Liao had observed for several days without finding a suitable target. Therefore, Pu proposed an even more vicious plan. He said if they saw adults with children, they could kill the adults first, then kidnap the children to sell. On July 12, 1994, Liao saw Shua Qin leading her 2 sons passing by Pu's house. Therefore, Pu actively stepped out to greet Shua Qin, saying he needed her to deliver a message to someone in Jiankou village. Without suspicion, Shua Qin followed Pu into the shop. To easily subdue Shua Qin, Liao first turned a cassette player's volume to maximum to mask any upcoming sounds. Unexpectedly, the cassette player's sound attracted the 2 brothers Yongyang to run in. In a bedroom behind Pu's shop, Liao first strangled Shua Qin and pinned her to the ground. At this point, Shua Qin struggled violently, so Pu pulled out a knife and stabbed her. After killing Shua Qin, Pu and Liao locked the 2 brothers Yongyang in the basement. About a week later, Pu contacted the human trafficker Zheng. Through Zheng's arrangement, the 2 brothers Yongyang were put on a train. They first went to Beijing, then transferred to Puchun City, Fujian Province. As for their mother Shua Qin, she had been dismembered by Pu and Liao and finally buried in a vegetable garden behind Pu's house. Around 10 a.m. on February 28, 2013, police brought suspect Pu to a bicycle repair shop on Baigao Street, Yongqing town. Around them, local residents had gathered in large numbers, hoping to learn the truth about the case as soon as possible. At the vegetable garden behind the shop, many residents had surrounded the body excavation site. Although Pu had confessed to all crimes, police still needed to find victim Xiao Shuichin's remains. According to Pu's confession, that year he and Liao had divided the body into 3 bags for burial. In 2008, he had dug up 2 bags and burned them. The burning location was in a corner of the courtyard. To ensure no criminal evidence was overlooked, technical staff meticulously crumbled each piece of dug-up soil. They carefully washed every fragment suspected to be bone. Besides some chicken and pig bone fragments, police also found some important evidence, including a fragment suspected to be human skull, some ashes from burning, plastic bag pieces used to wrap the body, and a rope used to tie the body. However, based on this evidence, technical staff still couldn't prove the victim had been buried in this garden. Their only hope was finding the 3rd unburned bag. But the case had occurred 18 years ago, and Pu said he couldn't clearly remember where the 3rd bag was buried in the vegetable garden. In this situation, the investigation team had to decide to dig about 3 feet deep across the entire garden. As a result, they quickly unearthed a plastic sandal. This sandal had basically melted with only the sole still showing a bit of white color. By evening, a final black plastic bag was found. Inside was a bag of bones that, when assembled, formed the lower extremities of a human. DNA testing later confirmed these were Xiao Shuichin's bones from 18 years ago. At this point, the case investigation had results, and Zhao Yongyang had through his efforts brought justice for his mother. However, his brother Zhao Yongquan was still missing. To continue tracing related clues, police decided to return to Putian City, Fujian Province. This time, the human trafficker Wang led them to the family who had bought Yongquan that year. However, after deeper investigation, police discovered that Yongquan had been sold 3 times. According to Wang's confession, he had initially sold Yongquan to a local named Siafa for 7,500 yuan, approximately $1,100. Later, Siafa saw Yongquan constantly crying and felt unsafe, so through another middleman, he sold him at a lower price to a man named Chun, also a middleman, who then sold Yongquan to a man surnamed Wu. Through subsequent investigation, police learned that after Yongquan arrived at the Wu household, he was renamed Wu Qingfa. However, when police brought Yongyang to the Wu household, Wu Qingfa was working in Beijing. After confirming through photographs, police helped Yongyang successfully contact his brother, Yongquan. On March 20, 2013, Yongyang finally found his long-lost brother Yongquan and brought him back to their hometown in Sichuan. After 19 years, the case was finally solved, and the 2 lost sons finally returned home. For their aging father Dafu, if the eldest son Yongyang hadn't found his way home, perhaps the truth of this case would have remained buried forever. On August 14, 2014, the Dazhou City Intermediate People's Court issued its initial verdict. Defendant Pu Jijin was sentenced to death for the crimes of intentional homicide and child kidnapping. Defendant Liao Dingjie was sentenced to life imprisonment for the same crimes. Additionally, Pu Jijin and Liao Dingjie were ordered to compensate the civil plaintiffs 50.897.50 yuan, approximately $7,500. After sentencing, defendants Pu Jijin and Liao Dingjie, dissatisfied with the verdict, immediately appealed in court. On April 20, 2015, the Sichuan Province High People's Court issued its appeal verdict, rejecting Pu Jijin and Liao Dingjie's appeals and upholding the original sentence. On November 24, 2014, another defendant, Zheng Jixian, was sentenced by the Kaijin County People's Court to 11 years in prison and fined 10,000 yuan, approximately $1,500, for kidnapping women and children. The illegal proceeds from his criminal activities would continue to be recovered. After successfully finding his family, the elder brother Zhao Yongyang chose to return to Sihue City to continue his work at the gemstone workshop to make a living. The elderly father Zhao Dafu brought his new wife back to Jiangsu village, where they raised ducks and worked in the fields to maintain their livelihood. The younger brother Zhao Yongquan chose to settle in Beijing. Although the family had reunited, they still had to live separately in 3 different places because the beautiful days from 18 years ago could never return. Story 3. On a fateful afternoon in August 1967, residents of Taipei's Wanhua district witnessed a startling scene. A man, drenched in sweat, burst into the local police station. His name was Jiang Jing'en, and between labored breaths, he began telling a story that would leave every officer in the station stunned. "Last night, I was forced to help bury 2 bodies," Jing'en blurted out, immediately drawing the officers' full attention. As his story unfolded, a horrifying crime came to light. At Chikai Art Garden, a mannequin factory located at 51 Kongding Road, the owner, Wang Wenmin, had murdered both his wife and an apprentice. Jing'en claimed he had been coerced into helping dispose of the bodies, which were now buried in the factory's basement. Initially, the police were skeptical of this bizarre claim. The idea of real bodies being buried in a factory that made artificial ones seemed like something out of a horror movie. Moreover, Kongding Road was in one of Taipei's busiest commercial districts. Who would dare commit murder and conceal bodies in such a crowded area? What made the officers even more suspicious was Jing'en's behavior. For someone claiming to be an accomplice, he seemed unusually eager to confess. The officers also noticed something off about his demeanor. He didn't seem entirely mentally stable. Despite their doubts, the police had to investigate. They brought Jing'en to Chikai Art Garden, a 4-story building where each floor served a different purpose. A beauty salon on the 2nd floor, residential apartments on the 3rd and 4th floors, and the mannequin factory occupying both the ground floor and basement. According to neighboring businesses, the factory was highly successful, supplying mannequins to fashion stores throughout Taiwan. They operated almost constantly, rarely closing even on holidays. That's why it struck everyone as odd when 2 days earlier, owner Wenman had suddenly announced the factory would be closed, posting a "Closed Today" sign on the door, something completely out of character. When the investigation team arrived, several reporters were already on scene. After repeatedly knocking with no response, the police were forced to break down the door. As soon as the door gave way, police and reporters flooded into the building. The ground floor featured a display window containing 6 plastic mannequins. Though officers thoroughly searched this level, they found no bloodstains or signs of struggle. Finding nothing on the main floor, the group descended to the basement, where Jing'en claimed the bodies were buried. The scene that greeted them was unsettling. Dismembered mannequin parts scattered everywhere, arms, legs, heads, and torsos strewn about, while the air was thick with the pungent smell of isoamyl alcohol used in mannequin production. Faced with this eerie tableau, police began to theorize that Jing'en might have been affected by the toxic environment. The combination of harsh chemical fumes and the grotesque appearance of the disassembled mannequins could have caused him to hallucinate, mistaking plastic parts for human remains. However, Jing'en, his body trembling, insisted on pointing to a specific section of the concrete floor, maintaining that the bodies were buried beneath. Initially, the floor showed no obvious signs of having been disturbed. But while everyone was still puzzling over this, one detective made a crucial discovery in the bathroom, a pile of what appeared to be freshly excavated soil. Additionally, under the display case upstairs, they found cement and fine sand, materials that had nothing to do with mannequin production and were typically only found at construction sites. When these discoveries were cross-referenced with Jing'en's testimony, investigators began to suspect his story might have merit after all. The police decided to excavate the concrete floor, bringing in 4 mortuary workers with specialized equipment to handle the task. Almost immediately, they found something disturbing. The steel reinforcement bars beneath the concrete had been deliberately cut. Then, at about 8 inches deep, they made a chilling discovery, a fabric glove. The atmosphere at the scene grew increasingly tense. As they reached a depth of roughly 20 to 28 inches, the workers encountered something unusual. When they lifted it out, they realized it was human hair. Immediately after, the unmistakable odor of decomposition filled the air, confirming the investigators' worst fears. There were indeed bodies buried under the floor. From this point on, the excavation proceeded with extreme caution to preserve evidence and protect the integrity of any remains for future forensic examination. At 11 p.m., they uncovered the first body, a woman with no visible external injuries. Just 30 minutes later, they found the second body, a male. Unlike the first victim, this body showed clear signs of violence. The face and body were bruised and swollen, with distinct strangulation marks on the neck. The bodies had been stacked in the pit, with the female victim placed on top of the male. Fortunately, both victims' faces were intact enough for identification, confirming Jing'en's story. The female victim was Su Huan, Wenmin's wife, and the male was Chen Guofeng, an apprentice at the factory. The medical examiner's report revealed that both victims had died approximately 2 days earlier, with asphyxiation as the cause of death. However, one peculiar detail caught the investigators' attention. Su Huan's head had been shaved, and the hair they'd found during excavation was confirmed to be hers. This raised an intriguing question. If Jing'an's account was true, and Wen Min was the killer, why would he shave his wife's head? As police prepared to arrest Wen Min, they realized they'd made a critical error in their investigation protocol. Their initial skepticism of Jing'an's story had led them to skip securing the suspect before searching the premises. As a result, by the time they confirmed the truth of his claims, Wen Min had already fled. Even more shocking were the rumors circulating in the district. Local residents claimed that during the excavation, Wen Min himself had been among the onlookers, disguised and watching as police unearthed his victims. In the chaos of the crowded crime scene, officers had failed to recognize him. This revelation was a devastating blow to the police department's reputation. Police immediately issued a nationwide warrant for Wen Min's arrest. To understand the motivation behind the murders, investigators began digging into the backgrounds of both the perpetrator and his victims. Wen Min, 31, despite lacking formal education, possessed remarkable artistic talent, particularly in mannequin crafting, and had built a solid reputation in the fashion industry. His wife, Su Huan, 1 year his junior, had met him at a billiard hall. They had 3 children together, but their marriage had been marked by frequent arguments and tension. The male victim, Chen Guofeng, was just 18 years old and had nearly completed his apprenticeship when he was killed. The investigation began with interviews of 3 apprentices who were on leave from Shirkai Art Garden. While none could explain their employer's motive for murder, they revealed a crucial detail. Recently, Wen Min had discovered 2,000 NDT, about $65, missing and had a violent argument with his wife. The dispute had escalated beyond verbal abuse. He had physically attacked her and shaved her head. 3 days before the murders, on the evening of August 3rd, Wen Min had abruptly announced he knew who had taken the money and gave all employees a week's vacation. The apprentices had barely begun their unexpected break when police appeared at their doors. Finding the apprentices' information limited, investigators expanded their inquiry to the victims' families, hoping to uncover any underlying conflicts with Wen Min. The first stop was Guofeng's family. They revealed that before his death, Guofeng had confided that Wen Min suspected him of having an affair with his wife and had beaten him. Despite his parents urging to quit, Guofeng had insisted on his innocence, believing that suddenly leaving would only intensify his employer's suspicions. Next, investigators approached Wen Min's family, hoping to gather more insight. Their conversation with Wang Jinjie, Wen Min's sister, provided crucial information about the family's troubled past. Jinjie disclosed that 4 years earlier, while Wen Min was away for military training, his wife Su Huan had begun an affair with a neighboring pharmacist who had a questionable reputation. What made matters worse was that the pharmacist had convinced Su Huan to give Wen Min a drug that, while not lethal, would render him impotent. During this period, Wen Min had noticed severe problems with his sexual function, but couldn't understand why. Despite consulting numerous doctors, he found no solution to his condition. A year later, the pharmacist tried to exploit Su Huan again. This time, he attempted to convince her to work as a hostess at a bar in Kaohsiung, promising good money. Su Huan firmly refused, ending their relationship. This incident seemed to be a turning point, making her realize the gravity of her actions. She eventually decided to confess everything to her husband. Upon learning the truth, Wen Min immediately reported the pharmacist to the police, resulting in appropriate legal consequences for his actions. However, even after justice was served, the betrayal continued to haunt when Min Jinjie also revealed another significant detail. Before disappearing, Wen Min had borrowed about 5,000 NDT, about $165 from her. She had given him the money without hesitation. With these new pieces of information, investigators began forming a clearer picture of the case. They theorized that Wen Min's trauma from his wife's past infidelity had led him to suspect a relationship between her and Guofeng. This paranoia could have been the primary motivation for both murders. While this theory seemed plausible, it remained speculative. The police's most urgent task was still locating Wen Min. Initially, police were confident about capturing him quickly. They had 3 reasons for this optimism. First, Wen Min had no known connections to organized crime. Second, he had fled with only 5,000 NDT. And third, Taiwan's island geography made escape particularly challenging. However, another complicated aspect of the case demanded attention: Jingen's role in the murders. As both an alleged accomplice and the informant, his motives required careful scrutiny. Why did he choose to confess? Was he truly coerced, or had he been a willing participant in the murders, who later turned informant due to some dispute? To resolve these questions, the police split their investigation into two teams. One focused on tracking down Wen Min, while the other concentrated on interrogating Jin more thoroughly. During questioning, Jin provided a detailed account of the fateful night. According to him, around 10 p.m. on August 4th, Wen Min had suddenly appeared at his house in a state of distress. Wen Min claimed his wife had been missing for 2 days, and that despite reporting it to the police, there had been no leads. He said he planned to search for her in Taichung, and asked Jin to accompany him. Without much thought, Jin agreed. The two men rode a motorcycle to Taipei Station. Once there, Wen Min suddenly remembered he needed to retrieve something important from the factory. They returned to Chikai Art Garden. However, as soon as they entered, Wen Min locked the iron gate and revealed the horrifying truth. His wife had done something unforgivable, and he had killed both her and an apprentice. He needed Jingen's help disposing of the bodies. Jin claimed he panicked and tried to flee, but Wen Min threatened him, saying the bodies were under the bed and he wouldn't hesitate to add a third. With no escape route, Jin said he was forced to help drag the bodies from the bedroom to the basement, placing them in a pre-dug hole. They began filling the hole, a task that lasted until dawn. When daylight broke, Jin thought his nightmare was over and asked to leave, but Wen Min wasn't finished. He forced Jin to accompany him to buy cement, quick-drying agents, and isoamyl alcohol to refinish the floor and erase all evidence of their crime. While Wen Min was busy mixing cement, Jin seized his chance to escape. Following his survival instincts, he ran straight home and hid in his wardrobe, not daring to make a sound. Wen Min searched his house but, fortunately, failed to find him and eventually left. However, Jin realized his home wasn't safe. By afternoon, he fled to his brother's house seeking refuge. Too terrified to explain coherently what had happened, he just frantically urged his brother to call the police. Before his brother could react, Wen Min appeared at their doorstep. Jin was forced to escape through the back door and ran straight to the police station. Although Jingen's testimony seemed credible and was validated by the discovery of the bodies exactly where he indicated, deeper analysis revealed several troubling inconsistencies. The first major discrepancy concerned the physical disparity between the men. Jin was a blacksmith with a large, robust build and considerable strength. In contrast, Wen Min was relatively slight, standing only about 5 feet 3 inches. Given this physical advantage, it seemed implausible that Jin would be so easily intimidated by Wen Min. Another suspicious element was the sequence of events. In disposing of the bodies, digging the hole was arguably the most challenging part, yet Wen Min had completed this alone. This raised the question: why would he need help with the relatively easier tasks of moving and burying the bodies? Furthermore, involving an outsider like Jin seemed counterintuitive, essentially creating an unnecessary witness to his crimes. Confronted with these inconsistencies, police questioned Jin again. This time, he dramatically changed his story. Jin admitted he hadn't been coerced at all. The truth was that Wen Min had promised him money, and in a moment of greed, he had willingly helped conceal the bodies. However, he claimed that shortly after, his conscience got the better of him, prompting his confession to the police. During their deeper investigation, police discovered that Jin actually suffered from mental health issues. Years earlier, he had sustained a head injury in a car accident that affected his nervous system. While he could maintain basic daily activities and social interactions, his thought processes and manner of expression were noticeably different from the norm. Furthermore, investigators learned there was a family connection between the two men. Jingen's brother was Wen Min's brother-in-law, and Wen Min had even introduced Jin to his wife. Considering Jingen's mental condition and the family ties between them, it made more sense why Wen Min might have chosen him for help. However, this also raised a new concern. Given Jingen's mental state, how reliable were his statements? This made finding Wen Min even more crucial. He was the key to unraveling the entire case. Police were so confident about catching Wen Min that they didn't even offer a reward for his capture. However, as the investigation progressed, things became increasingly complicated. After searching throughout Taipei and expanding their investigation to Taichung, police still couldn't locate Wenmin. Just as they were growing frustrated with the lack of progress, a new development made the case even more complex. A man named Yang Gongquan rushed to the police station to report that his wife Lu Wang had disappeared and was likely with Wenmin. Yang's family ran a wig-making business and had frequent dealings with Wenmin's mannequin factory, which was how the families knew each other. Lu Wang, 30, was a mother of 5, with her youngest still nursing. Gongquan had 2 reasons to suspect his wife's disappearance was connected to Wenmin. First, they had disappeared on the same day, and second, neighbors had witnessed Lu Wang getting on Wenmin's motorcycle before they rode away. Gongquan feared his wife might have been coerced or even kidnapped. This report opened a new avenue of investigation. When police searched the Chikai art garden again, they discovered intimate photographs of Lu Wang among Wenmin's belongings. The photos appeared to have been taken with Lu Wang's consent, suggesting their relationship was more than casual. Further investigation revealed that when Lu Wang left, she had taken her ID and some cash with her. Based on interviews with her children, police concluded she hadn't been kidnapped or coerced, but had willingly fled with Wenmin. This discovery made the police's task even more challenging. Now they weren't just looking for a fugitive murderer, but one accompanied by a willing companion. Throughout August, the fugitive couple became Taiwan's most talked about story. The public was eager to see them captured and brought to justice. However, their whereabouts remained a mystery. Rumors placed them everywhere from southern Taiwan to the central regions, and even in Sanjiang. Police had no concrete leads. Initially, investigators thought that by blocking their access to bank accounts and preventing family assistance, the 5,000 new Taiwan dollars Wenmin had taken would soon force them out of hiding. Police warnings were published in multiple newspapers, stating that anyone harboring the couple would be charged with aiding and abetting criminals. However, these measures failed to draw them out, leaving law enforcement increasingly frustrated. On August 16th, 10 days after the murders, police intercepted a letter from Wenmin to his father. The front of the letter, written in Chinese, appealed for sympathy for his 5 children and requested his father give Gongquan about 2,000 NDT for living expenses. However, on the back was a message in Japanese saying, "Don't give the money." This was clearly a deception by Wenmin, taking advantage of Lu Wang's inability to read Japanese to secretly instruct his father to withhold the money. Rather than delivering the letter, police released its contents to the press through reporters, hoping to create discord between the fugitives. Police investigation had shown that Lu Wang had been home with her children during the murders and wasn't involved in the killings. They hoped that exposing Wenmin's deception would convince her that fleeing with him had been a mistake and persuade her to return home. In addition, the police also let Lu Wang's husband Gongquan publish an open letter in the newspaper. Gongquan promised in the newspaper that if Lu Wang returned, everything would be forgiven. Their eldest daughter also wrote a letter herself saying, "Mom, my sister and brother are both crying. I miss you so much." However, these efforts did not move Lu Wang. Wenmin and Lu Wang were still missing. Thus, the police's efforts had not yet yielded any important clues. Many people began to question the police's ability. On August 24th, with no other choice, the police offered a reward of 30,000 NDT, about $750, for anyone who could provide Wenmin's location, which could lead to his arrest. However, Lu Wang's neighbors pointed out that the photo of Lu Wang released by was an old photo taken after the birth of her 5th child, when she looked chubby, while now she had lost a lot of weight. Such photos were of no help at all in the search. The police then revealed another important feature of Wenmin, saying that he had a strange disease and needed to drink herbal tea regularly in the summer. This information caused herbal tea stalls across Taiwan to be packed with people, hoping to find Wenmin and receive a reward of 30,000 NDT. Since the reward announcement, the police have received more than 160 tips, but unfortunately, none of them were useful. Just when everyone thought that the case might become a suspended sentence, on August 30th, there was a dramatic turn. Wenmin suddenly sent a letter to the United Press. In the letter, he described his difficult life as a fugitive and expressed his strong desire to return to his family. He also emphasized in the letter that he did not intentionally kill his wife Su Huan and practitioner Guofeng. He admitted to assaulting his wife but claimed that he did not realize that her injuries were serious enough to require emergency treatment, which ultimately led to her death. Wenmin also said that if the Lianhe newspaper published his letter, he and Lu Wang would turn themselves in to the Criminal Investigation Department the next day. The Lianhe newspaper published Wenmin's letter early in the morning of August 31st. That evening around 11 o'clock, Wenmin and Lu Wang did indeed appear. The two took a taxi to the police station door, held hands, and turned themselves in. From the photos in the newspapers the next day, the two looked clean and tidy, not like they had just run away. Especially Lu Wang, she clung tightly to Wenmin's side. It turned out that during the time they were on the run, Wenmin and Lu Wang had been hiding in a small house near the Nanmen police station in Hsinchu City. Wenmin even borrowed a bicycle, wore a conical hat, and sold herbal tea along the road every day. While everyone was waiting at the herbal tea stalls, hoping to catch Wenmin and receive the 30,000 NDT reward, they did not expect that Wenmin was hiding right in front of them. The two men surrendered, finally making the police breathe a sigh of relief, but the problems of the case were not over yet. When Wenmin was questioned, he admitted that he had indeed assaulted his wife, leading to her death due to not being able to receive timely medical treatment, but firmly denied any involvement in Guofang's death. On the contrary, he insisted that the person who killed Guofang was Jing Zhen, the person who had initially reported him. Wenmin recalled that a week before the incident on July 24th, he discovered that 2,000 NDT was missing from his pocket. Suspecting that his wife had stolen it, he began searching everywhere and found a bottle of perfume in a drawer. He immediately became angry, thinking that this bottle of perfume was a gift from some lover to his wife, thus confirming that his wife must have had an affair. In a fit of rage, Wenmin used rope to tie up his wife, beat her, and interrogated her. Not only that, he also cut Su Huan's hair to prevent her from going out to meet other people. After this violence, Su Huan was seriously injured and had to stay in bed. On July 31st, practitioner Guofang brought food to the injured owner Su Huan. Wenmin happened to see the two whispering to each other. He immediately suspected that they had an illicit relationship. Therefore, he immediately tied up Guofang, beat her, and interrogated her. So, what did Su Huan and Guofang really talk about that day? According to Guofang's family's testimony, when they saw Guofang injured that day, they asked what happened. He explained that when he brought food to his boss that day, she secretly told him that Wenmin suspected him of stealing 2,000 NTD and beat her every day. If this continued, she would be beaten to death. So she asked Guofang to help her seek help from outside. Unfortunately, this whispering conversation was caught by Wenmin, causing him to be brutally tortured by his boss. After hearing it, his family advised him not to go to work anymore. But Guofang insisted that he was innocent and decided to go back and explain clearly to Wenmin. When he confronted Wenmin again in order to prove his innocence, Guofang told him that the person who really had an illicit relationship with Su Huan was not him, but Wenmin's brother-in-law, Jing An's brother. At this time, Jing An was also present at the scene. Hearing this, he flew into a rage and immediately refuted Guofang. "You are the one who has a relationship with your sister-in-law, and you still want to blame my brother." In a fit of rage, Jing An beat Guofang up. In order to prevent Guofang from screaming, he also covered the victim's mouth while punching and kicking. Seeing this, Su Huan quickly spoke up to stop him, making Wenmin even angrier and turning to beat his wife. During the fight, Guofang stopped breathing, and Su Huan died shortly after. Wenmin and Jing An realized that they had both committed the murder, so they went to buy digging tools and cement together and disposed of the body together. Wenmin admitted that the whole incident from beginning to end was done by him and Jing An together, and that he had not killed the person alone, and then asked Jing An to help dispose of the body. However, he did not expect that Jing An would report it to the police the next day. Wenmin recounted that when he saw the police and reporters rushing into the store, he realized that he could no longer hide it. At this time, he hurriedly ran to his lover Lu Wang, asking if he had killed someone and needed to escape, wondering if she wanted to go with him. Lu Wang agreed without hesitation, took her ID card and some cash, and set off on the run with him. After reading the newspaper reports on the case, Wenmin felt that the press had reported it seriously, so he decided to turn himself in. He asserted that the truth was not as described in the press. These statements were completely different from Jing An's. Jing An claimed that he only participated in burying the body, while Wenmin said that Jing An killed Guofang, and then the two of them disposed of the body together. However, Wenmin's statement also had many unreasonable points. The forensic report indicated that Guofang died from strangulation. If Wenmin said that Guofang was beaten to death, then how should the traces of strangulation on the body be explained? This contradiction became a key point in the subsequent trial. On October 18th, 1967, the case was brought to trial by the Taipei District Court. Although Wen Min insisted that Su Huan's death was an accident, the court did not accept this justification. Therefore, Wen Min's death sentence was almost certain. The main point of contention in the case was whether the whistleblower Jing and actually killed Guofeng. In the first instance, the Taipei District Court held that the deaths of Su Huan and Guofeng were both caused by Wang Wenmin, who suspected the two of having an illicit relationship and had the intention to kill. Jingen was only forced to participate in burying the body, so he was declared innocent and released. However, the prosecutor did not agree with this verdict and appealed. Over the next 9 years, Jingen's verdict alternated between guilty and innocent. It was not until March 16, 1976, that the Supreme Court made its final judgment, declaring Jingen guilty of murder. The decision was based on the fact that Jingen had told other inmates in Taipei prison 2 sentences. "I wish murder would only be a life sentence, and because Chen Guofeng was nosy, I strangled him." In addition, the judge pointed out that during the course of the incident, Jingen had many opportunities to escape, but he did not choose to leave halfway and only ran to his brother's house after he had finished disposing of the body. The judge thought that if he was truly innocent, why didn't he escape earlier? This showed that he was not completely innocent. Based on these doubts, the court finally found him guilty of intentional homicide and sentenced him to life in prison. As for Wen Min, during the 9 years of trial, his death sentence was always upheld, and he was executed by firing squad on the 4th day after the final verdict. However, at that time, the public was no longer interested in Wen Min's fate. Everyone's attention turned to the woman who had run away with Wen Min, Lu Wang. Everyone wanted to know why a mother of 5 children would abandon her family to follow a man who had just killed his wife and fled. Through investigation, everyone learned that Lu Wang and Wen Min had known each other since childhood and were childhood sweethearts. They shared a common interest in painting, and their personalities were very compatible. Lu Wang later married Gan Quan, but their marriage was not a happy one. Story 4. April 12, 2014, around 10 a.m. Police receive a disturbing phone call from a man at a home in the city of Pleasant Grove, Utah. Pleasant Grove is around 35 miles away from Salt Lake City and is home to around 38,000 people. The house in question is a fairly new-built 3-bedroomed home on a quiet and unsuspecting street. The front garden is strewn with various bits and pieces, and a single ornament hangs over the front door. Darren West had just been released from prison on a drugs-related charge, and had gone back to his former house to sort the garage out and gather his belongings. He used to share the home with his now ex-wife, 39-year-old Megan Huntsman, and their 3 children, 11-year-old Sawyer, 17-year-old JC and Darren, who had just turned 18. In 2005, Darren had pleaded guilty in federal court to 2 counts of possessing chemicals intended to be used in manufacturing methamphetamine. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison, but he maintained his innocence the entire time. The house in question was owned by his parents. Megan had also ended up leaving the home in 2011 at Darren's parents' request when they found out that she had been having an affair. Hers and Darren's daughters continued to live in the house with another relative taking care of them. Megan moved around for a while, spending time living with her mother in West Valley City, before moving in with her boyfriend Jimmy at Meadowood Village Mobile Home Park. Megan's mother described her daughter as very quiet, someone that kept to herself. She said she always struggled with mental health issues, but never wanted to ask for help and rarely shared anything about her life, keeping secrets about a lot of things. Megan and Darren had met in high school, and Megan would soon fall pregnant with their first child. She eventually moved out at the age of 18, and she and Darren got married, before having their second daughter a little over a year later. Down the line, things started to spiral for Megan and Darren. They became addicted to methamphetamine, and this completely consumed Megan's life for years. People that knew Megan said that the mother of 2 was suffering badly from depression, was losing jobs because of her addiction, and the marriage between her and Darren was becoming violent because of the drugs. When she finally stopped using meth, she turned to alcohol, becoming heavily dependent on that instead. Her drinking became even worse when in 2012 her father took his own life. As 2014 rolled around, Darren and Megan had long been split up and were now virtually estranged. Darren was back at the house with a few of the people to help him sort through his things. Whilst moving stuff out of the garage, he noticed a strong odor, something that smelled like chemicals emitting from one of the cardboard boxes. The box read, "Baby stuff Megan's." It was tightly sealed with electrical tape. Once pulled off, he made a gruesome and horrifying discovery. He found the corpse of a baby wrapped up inside a plastic bag. The only person he could think of was Megan. He phoned her immediately, and she made a shocking admission. She said that the baby was hers and Darren's, and that she had given birth when he was in prison. The baby had been stillborn, and out of fear and panic she had wrapped it up and hidden it, scared about calling someone or going to a hospital. Darren was shaken and immediately phoned authorities. They received an order to conduct a thorough investigation of the house. Pleasant Grove police quickly arrived at the property, and the home was swiftly taped off. As police were searching the garage, they found some bloody leather gloves too. Already a very disturbing scene, officers arrived at the mobile home park. Megan's boyfriend had just returned to find police cars surrounding his home, and officers said that they needed to take Megan in for questioning. One of her neighbors, a man named Mr. Brady, recalled that upon hearing the police had found the baby's body, Megan had gone to him and begged him for a gun. Whilst at the station, Megan told police the same story that she had told Darren. The baby in the box was her child, and when she realized they had been a stillborn, she panicked and didn't know what else to do. But as the search of the property carried on, to the officers' horror and shock, they came face to face with so much more than anyone could have imagined. Darren West had just finished serving a 9-year prison sentence and was ready to start his new life with his 3 girls. Current owners of the home called the police on Saturday after finding a child's remains while clearing out their garage. Some family members of the residents were cleaning out the garage, came across this suspicious package, had kind of a pungent odor. Were found in a home that had been owned by the same family for years. They were well known to the neighbors. She was pregnant multiple times. The bodies of 6 other infants that appeared to be full stage were located inside there. Discovering the remains of 7 infants in the garage. 6 more babies' bodies were found wrapped up in either towels, shirts, or plastic bags, and then placed inside various boxes. Captain Michael Roberts described the scene as emotionally draining and hugely upsetting to the investigators. One detective said, "Some of the things officers saw in that garage they can never unsee." The tiny bodies were sent to the medical examiner's office for testing, one of which was to determine the cause of death and also determine a DNA match. Just days after the heartbreaking scene was discovered, an arrest was made that would leave the neighborhood in disbelief. A woman in Utah has been arrested on suspicion of murder after police found the bodies of 7 babies stuffed in separate cardboard boxes in her former home. Megan Huntsman was arrested and booked into the Utah County Jail on suspicion of 6 counts of murder on Sunday while the investigation continues. Megan Huntsman was charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder and was now on suicide watch in Utah County Jail. A devastating secret that had been kept under wraps for what would turn out to be 18 years was finally out in the open. All of the children found in the garage were confirmed to be Megan's. One of the babies had been a stillborn, but the other 6 had either been suffocated or strangled. There were 5 girls and 2 boys. They determined that her poor babies could have only been alive for a matter of minutes before they were killed. "We are still investigating the motives to find out why this happened, how this could have happened," said Police Chief Mike Smith. "In my opinion, no matter what we come up with or say, it's just not something that you can wrap your mind around, of how a mother could do something like this." When officers told Megan that they had found more than 1 baby, she appeared confused. Police say the Utah woman accused of killing 6 babies and hiding them along with a stillborn couldn't tell detectives exactly how many infants she had in her home. KSDU reports Megan Huntsman told detectives there were 8 or 9 babies in her home, but police said they found 7. Police said 6 of those infants died after Huntsman allegedly strangled them. She later said she had just made a guess and wasn't actually sure how many they would find. The question everyone needed answers to was why. Megan eventually told detectives that she wanted to help her babies avoid the terrible life she would ultimately have given them. She said her life was too chaotic, consumed by drugs and alcohol, and coupled with her mental health issues. She said she knew she couldn't take care of them physically, emotionally, or financially. "I deprived my little babies of the opportunity of life," she said. "I think my mind was just so out of it. All I was focused on was the next fix." Between the years of 1996 and 2006, Megan had fallen pregnant 7 times, and police think she would have given birth alone and in secret in her home, and there were no records of her ever having been to a hospital. Apart from the baby that had been a stillborn, she had killed every other one she had, within minutes of them entering the world. She had often covered them in chemicals to conceal any smell of decomposition, wrapped them up in various things, and hidden them in the garage, before carrying on with her life. Megan and Darren had 3 children still living in the house, and detectives needed to know why she had made the decision to kill her other babies. She told police it all began happening after she became addicted to methamphetamine. Her first 2 daughters were born before she began using the drug, and although she was pregnant with her 3rd living daughter when she was heavily into her addiction, too many people were aware of the pregnancy, including Darren, so she had to go through with everything. After her daughter was born, she barely told anyone about her other pregnancies, and those she did tell were later told by Megan that she had miscarried. She said she was selfish, and ultimately spent over a decade choosing drugs over anything else. It appeared from everything that Megan had said, it was entirely of her own doing, and no other person played a part in it. She told police she had wanted to move the bodies out of the garage, but was unsure how to do so without being caught. Neighbors in the area said they were devastated and totally blindsided by Megan's arrest. I spoke with several neighbors on this street who say, not only is it shocking, not only is it disturbing, but it's just very sad because they knew her very well. Quite frankly, I'm still in a state of shock. We were wondering what the heck is going on. Yeah, we were worried about her because we could see that she was not looking in good health, and we were worried about the children that lived there with her. Her 3 daughters lived there. The Hawkers say the answers only created more questions, like how Huntsman had allegedly hid 7 different pregnancies from the tight-knit community. She always looked kind of slim. I mean, to have this many babies full term, it's like, where were they? You didn't have any idea she was ever pregnant, and you had no idea she had a meth problem? No, absolutely not. She was very quiet, and pretty much stayed to herself, stayed in the house. I saw her walking up the driveway a few times, but couldn't hardly ever get her to wave. Just a very quiet person. I never would have ever thought she was on drugs or pregnant. The first 2 girls that she had, no one knew she was even pregnant until someone said, "We need to go to the hospital. Megan's in the hospital having a baby." That was the only thing I could ever think of. It's hard to imagine 10 pregnancies, because she does have 3 daughters, but 10 and never showing? No, I had talked to her before. I helped her mow her lawn a few times, helped her with the lawn mower. I never had a clue, and that was the days that she would have killed the babies. I never even dreamed that she was on meth. The majority of people said that although they noticed her gaining and losing weight over the years, they had no idea she was pregnant. Darren's family issued a statement saying they were in a state of shock and confusion. We are mourning this tragic loss of life, and we are trying to stay strong and help each other through this awful event. Despite Darren disputing the possibility of paternity due to the affair his ex-wife had been having, he was later confirmed to be the father of all 7 babies. Darren told police he only had knowledge of a couple of pregnancies, but was told Megan had miscarried. He said the discovery had shocked him as much as anyone. Authorities said they didn't believe he was aware of the murders and was not deemed a person of interest at the time. In the end, there just turned out to be no evidence that would implicate him, officers said. When asked how he could not have known about any of this, the police captain Michael Roberts said, "That's the million-dollar question." Furthermore, no one had any idea of how Megan's grown children, who were still living in the house, did not notice their mother was pregnant either. On one occasion, Megan had actually given birth upstairs in the bathroom before killing the newborn and cleaning up, all while members of her family were sat just downstairs. As hearings for Megan Huntsman began, she arrived at court with cuffs around her ankles and wrists, often looking straight at the floor as the legal team spoke. She was held on a $6 million bail, $1 million for each baby. Megan's legal team were keen for a speedy process. "Okay, I see that you have been notified by state, and you indicate no income unless it's done through payment. Do you have a word since then?" "It was actually 2012, sorry." "Oh, okay. Do you otherwise have any money in the bank, or any other investment or anything that would help you retain it?" "No, I don't. We're requesting a continuance of 2 weeks, if possible." "Yeah, we've spoken about the idea that the state has some pretty serious accusations that they intend to bring. I've spoken with her about the delay. 2 weeks, she's concerned that that's fairly long. In the balance of interest, I think if the state is at all able to file something sooner, we would prefer that." It was stated that Megan would not face the death penalty for the charges. This was because she was accused of killing her babies between 1996 and 2006, and this was before the law in Utah changed in 2007. This change in the law made murder a capital offense if a victim was younger than 14. Until this law passed, Killing a child was not actually considered one of the factors that could make someone eligible for the death penalty. These were very cold, calculated killings, said prosecutor Jeff Berman. She was a woman who was remarkably, unbelievably, incredibly indifferent and callous. Judge Darrell McDade was presiding, and he recalled that he was the judge who had signed the initial search warrant on the day that the babies' bodies were found. He said he had quietly hoped and prayed he wouldn't be the one assigned to deal with it in court. I really thought I'd seen it all until this case. It shocked me then, and it shocks me now, he said. She said if she had the babies, she would hold it for a short time. She said that none of the babies were alive more than a minute or two, and then she said that she used her thumbs, and she would just show me like this. These were very cold, calculated killings. She was the Megan that I had always known. No one would have ever guessed this shy, timid girl was capable of this. The person I know is not the same girl that the media portrayed as her baby. Megan agreed to enter a plea rather than go to trial. This was under an agreement that could reduce her minimum sentence to 5 years, but by taking this, it would leave fewer options for her to appeal down the line. Prosecutors were satisfied to allow this to go ahead, and said that it would have been hard to prove a case against her at trial if she hadn't cooperated with police. On February 12, 2015, Megan Huntsman pleaded guilty to all 6 counts of murder. The charge is one of lethal doctrine. Do you understand that? Count 3, murder, a first-degree felony. What is your plea? Count 4, murder, a first-degree felony. What is your plea? Count 5, murder, a first-degree felony. What is your plea? Judge Darrell McDade lamented the facts of the Megan Huntsman case as he sentenced her for killing 6 of her babies. It was April of last year when Huntsman's estranged husband called police. After opening a cardboard box in the family's garage in Pleasant Grove, Huntsman declined to speak in court except with a statement read by her attorney. Depression and alcohol took a hold of me the same way drugs did. I cannot give a reasonable answer why I was capable of such a sick and heinous crime. I held my secret for 18 years. As part of the plea deal, prosecutors had agreed to recommend that the 5 years to life in prison sentences run concurrent to one another, but Judge Darrell McDade was not satisfied by this, and said that it would be inappropriate for the terms to run concurrently. Therefore, I do think that it's appropriate that 3 of the charges run consecutively in this manner, and they can run concurrently with the other charges. Following this, the Utah Board of Pardons and Paroles set Megan's parole hearing for April 2064. She will be 89 years old. Prosecutor Jeff Berman said that even then, he doesn't think she will ever be released. My guess is that she'll serve the rest of her life, he said. She used her own hands to strangle and smother 6 of her babies, and it's hard to imagine anything more heinous than that. It's been horrible for our department, and some of the things that officers saw in that garage they can't unsee, and it was very, very emotionally tough on many of our officers. In court, her 3 daughters read statements and stood by their mother, saying she had always been the best mom to them. No matter what anyone thinks you are a good person, one said. Another read, this is not the mom I know. The mom I know was the one who had dinner for us every night, a clean house, and was a loving mother. Nobody could guess my mom would do anything like this. Megan's sister and mother also showed their defense of Megan. Megan is not a monster, her sister told the judge. She's not evil. From what I understand, she was scared. The crimes of Megan Huntsman left the neighborhood shattered, and family and friends utterly devastated. It is simply an unfathomable series of events that cannot be made sense of, and it is something that will haunt many people for a long time to come. Story 2. I'm also grateful for the many messages of sympathy from all over the world, from British people, from South Africans. And this case is not about Syrians and the 3 accused. It's about my beautiful daughter and me not forgetting her. And I'm sure she'll be very, very happy today to hear what we got for the decision. As a father, I demand justice against whoever involved in this. And I wish I get that justice. I wish Syrians a very speedy recovery from his illness, so that he can now go to Cape Town and help the police and clear his name, as he says. 28-year-old Annie Nenehindoka was born to Vinod and Nilam in Sweden. Her family were originally from Uganda, but they had been forced to leave in the early 1970s, after the country's President Idi Amin gave all Ugandans of South Asian descent 90 days to leave the country. The family were granted residence in Sweden and settled in Maristad before Annie was born. Annie had 2 siblings, a sister named Amy and a brother, Anish. Annie's father, Vinod, thrived in Sweden after starting a successful business, and the family were very settled. Intelligent, ambitious, and confident, Vinod said he knew he spoiled her, but he couldn't help himself. Annie's cousin said she was like the leader of the pack and the glue of the family. After graduating from university, Annie moved to Stockholm to work in marketing for the mobile phone maker Ericsson. As she reached her mid-20s, she was looking to settle down and hoping to find a husband. She adored her sister's children and was keen to start a family of her own. She regularly flew to London and would spend her time shopping, socializing, and making contacts. It wouldn't be long before she met 30-year-old Sri Indawani from Bristol. He was well-respected and successful, working in his family's nursing home business, and was already a millionaire before the age of 30. One of Annie's aunts had seen him around and thought the match between he and her niece would be perfect. She arranged for the pair to meet at a coffee shop. Annie's sister said that although Annie didn't seem to like him straight away, after the second date, she had warmed to him. Shreyan had been engaged previously, but the wedding was called off due to what was described as petty family disagreements. Shreyan and Annie had very similar lives, with Shreyan's parents also fleeing Uganda for the same reason Annie's had. People had differing opinions of Shreyan. Some said they found him to be quite arrogant, someone that loved to show off his wealth. Others said that beneath all that, he was actually very kind and generous. Annie's sister said that Annie would always talk about how much she liked Shreyan's sense of humor and the way he made her feel protected. As the couple entered into a long-distance relationship, taking it in turns to visit each other, they began finding things tough. Friends said they were both very headstrong and often argued, presumably about the distance. At one point, Annie called time on the relationship, but they eventually patched things up with Annie giving up her job in Stockholm and moving into an apartment in Luton so that the couple could be closer. Her parents soon flew over to meet Shreyan's family. Vinod recalled feeling a bit intimidated by the wealth of the Duani family, but said they were very welcoming and warm. Vinod said that everyone had really liked Shreyan. He was polite, educated, and driven, and the couple seemed to have a great connection. Annie told her dad that Shreyan did not believe in sex before marriage, something Vinod said showed dedication to his religion and Annie as his future wife. After the visit was over and both parents had approved of the couple and the families, Annie and Shreyan made plans to marry. In October 2010, hundreds of guests gathered just outside of Mumbai to celebrate the 3-day wedding of Shreyan Duani and Annie Hindotra. It was a truly exquisite event, and Annie had spent 3 months in India planning it. Vinod said that although his family were not wealthy like the Duanis, he had been saving for his children's wedding since they were born and wanted to give Annie everything she had dreamed of. As picture-perfect as the wedding had seemed, some of Annie's close friends recalled feeling weird about it, with one of her friends saying it didn't feel like Annie was very present, and someone else referring to the wedding as a strange experience that didn't feel like the friend she knew. The 3-day event would soon be over, and Shreyan and Annie Duani would be heading off for their honeymoon. 3 weeks after their gorgeous wedding, the couple headed to South Africa on their 10-day honeymoon. Annie had no idea where they were going, and the whole thing had been planned by Shreyan. He had told people he chose South Africa because it was an S for Shreyan and an A for Annie. After a busy and eventful few days, they arrived at Cape Town International Airport from Johannesburg on Friday, November 12th. Shreyan was looking to flag down a taxi. Instead of using the hotel's dedicated car service, he opted for the local shuttle service at a cheaper rate. A driver named Zola Tongo pulled over in a Volkswagen minivan, and the couple began the 20-minute drive to their lavish waterfront hotel called Cape Grace. Before Zola dropped the Duanis at their hotel, Shreyan asked Tongo to wait for him, so he could make plans for him to pick them up the following night for dinner. Shreyan said he wanted Tongo to show the couple around Cape Town as well, and Tongo agreed to act almost as an unofficial tour guide for the pair. The following day, before the couple were picked up by Tongo, they spent time at the bar having some drinks and taking pictures. Shreyan had reserved a table at 96 Winery Road, one of the most acclaimed restaurants in the area. Tongo picked the couple up at about 7:30 p.m., but on the way to the restaurant, Shreyan and Annie decided they weren't in the mood for a big meal and wanted something lighter. Tongo said he knew the right area and would take them there. He pulled off the highway just before 9 p.m. and eventually dropped them off at the Surfside restaurant in Strand. They stayed for only a short time before Tongo picked them up at around 10:30 p.m. Shreyan said Annie was keen to see the raw and real culture of some parts of South Africa, especially the nightlife of the townships. He said she insisted that Tongo drive around and show them what it was like. The three drove into the township of Guguletu. To this day, Guguletu has an extremely high crime rate. People that live there say it's rare to ever leave your homes after dark, let alone have tourists that visit. Over 700 people were murdered in Guguletu between 2005 and 2010, which amounts to one murder every 2.5 days for 5 consecutive years. The police said they themselves wouldn't even travel into some of the townships without being in a big group. At 10:45, Tongo stopped the car at an intersection, and out of nowhere, 2 men rushed the vehicle and started banging on the windows holding guns. The men got into the car, eventually forcing Tongo out. They began driving around for almost an hour, with the couple holding each other in the back seat, terrified. They took Shreyan's watch and phone, and Annie's jewelry. Eventually, the car stopped. The man who was driving said they didn't want to hurt the couple, and they would let them go, but separately. Shreyan was then thrown out onto the road, and the gun-wielding men sped off into the night with a hysterical Annie in the back seat. At 10:30 p.m., a man opened his door to find Shreyan standing in front of him, crying and asking if there was anywhere near he could report a carjacking. He had been stumbling up and down the road, knocking on doors, moving from one home to the next in the dark. The man said he asked him for details, but Shreyan was hazy and too distraught to remember a lot. The police arrived shortly after and took Shreyan back to the location it had happened in, driving around trying to piece everything together. They also quickly located the taxi driver Zola Tongo, who had reported the carjacking as well, and everyone headed back to the Cape Grace Hotel together. The hotel manager spoke with both Shreyan and Tongo. He commented how odd it was to be staying in a hotel as glamorous as the Cape Grace on your honeymoon, and be wanting to travel through dangerous townships like Guguletu in the middle of the night. Shortly after, Vinod got a call off Prakash Dewani back in Bristol, saying that Annie had been kidnapped. Vinod was confident they could pay the kidnappers whatever they wanted and save his daughter. After this, he would then answer the phone again, this time to Shreyan, telling him how sorry he was unable to protect Annie. Vinod booked the first flight out. Early the following morning, police received a call from a resident living in a neighborhood in Khayelitsha, about a 20-minute drive from Guguletu. They reported that a gray Volkswagen minivan had been sitting alongside the road all night. At 8 a.m., the police got to the vehicle. Lying across the back seat was the body of Annie Dewani. She had been shot once at point-blank range in the neck, and the bullet was lodged in the seat. She had some bruises on her body, and the coroner confirmed that she would have bled to death. Tragically, her father would hear of this as he was boarding his connecting flight from Amsterdam. He said he spent the journey feeling totally numb. He met Shreyan the following day at the Cape Grace Hotel. One of the officers that arrived at the scene that morning said he knew right away this would not be a straightforward case. Something felt strange and didn't sit right with him. He said that Tongo would have known the area well enough to know the dangers at least, and probably enough that he would have most likely been able to identify the 2 men. You wouldn't drive tourists around there during the day, let alone at night. So why did you? The officers asked. She insisted, Tongo said. But Annie's sister said she simply didn't believe Annie would have wanted to do that, and was well aware of the potential dangers they could face. The officer questioning Tongo wondered why the men let both he and Shreyan leave alive and unharmed, knowing they would likely go straight to the police and identify them. And then they proceed with Annie by herself, and she gets shot. That, to me, just doesn't gel, he recalled. The murder of Annie Dewani was shocking, and the residents of Cape Town in South Africa as a whole said despite the crime rate, this was still an appalling and awful case by anyone's standards. Annie's story took up vast amounts of space in the news, and had immense media coverage from all over the world. A honeymoon for a British couple has ended in tragedy just hours after their holiday began in Cape Town. This morning, the body of a 28-year-old woman was found in a car in Khayelitsha. Authorities threw a huge amount of time and resources at the case, keen to solve something that had become such big news so quickly. Zola Tongo was initially very helpful with police and was keen to answer their questions. The case was moving at a rapid pace, and the 2 men that had hijacked the vehicle were quickly located. Prince found in, and on the car took police straight to a man named Gali Menjini. He had been arrested several years earlier, and his prints had remained on file. He was apprehended in his home, and while police were searching around, they found a phone that had been wedged in between the mattress and the bed frame. When they asked who this belonged to, Menjini said it belonged to the taxi driver, Zola Tongo. Menjini confessed to his involvement almost immediately. He told police that the third man they were looking for was 26-year-old Zwamadola Quabe. Quabe was found 2 days later, and by this time, Shreyan had already flown back to the UK. While Quabe was being questioned, he threw a third and new name into the mix. Mon Balambo, a receptionist at another hotel. As Quabe was leaving one of his interviews, Mond was being brought in. As he passed him, Quabe asked police if he could speak to him, but that he would say it in English. He said police would soon make another announcement. The 31-year-old taxi driver, who had been so helpful in forthcoming with detectives, had also been arrested in connection with the murder of Anadwani. Zolatongo's friends said it came as a total shock to them. He had no criminal record, and had always been so responsible and law-abiding. They said something like this was hard to believe. But Shreyan told a reporter he had actually suspected that Tongo was involved, so the arrest didn't come as a complete shock. As the media firestorm raged on, Anadwani was finally laid to rest. 1,500 people would gather in a concert hall in London for Anadwani's memorial service, and her ashes would later be scattered in her favorite area of the Vänern Lake, which was close to her hometown in Sweden. The police's investigation continued, and to their surprise, Zola Tongo would make a claim so strong and startling that it would turn the investigation completely on its head. Tongo was escorted into Wynberg Magistrate's Court, his face hidden by a sheet. It had been announced that he was likely to enter a plea bargain and receive a more lenient sentence in exchange for more information about the case. Tongo claimed that this was no random attack, and he wanted to tell the whole truth about what had really happened that night. He alleged that it had in fact been Ani's husband Shreyan that had orchestrated the entire crime and put together the plan to kill his new bride. He said that the day he picked Shreyan and Ani up from the airport, Shreyan hung back to talk to him while Ani went inside. According to the CCTV, Shreyan spent almost 10 minutes talking to Tongo in the car. What Shreyan allegedly said was that he wanted someone taken off the scene. Tongo said to Shreyan that he was not the man for the job, but that he knew someone that could facilitate his request. He said that Shreyan offered 15,000 rand, the equivalent of less than 1,000 pounds at the time, to carry out the alleged hit. The police said that Tongo's claims appeared to be backed up by the copious amounts of CCTV footage, but others said that the CCTV backed up Shreyan's side of the story and version of events too. Tongo said that after he drove away, he headed to the hotel that Mond worked at, and it was here that Mond contacted Quabe, and the plan was set in motion. Phone records showed Mond repeatedly trying to get hold of Quabe and Tongo. The CCTV in the hotel Mond worked at had audio as well, and during one of the calls Tongo said that he had met Shreyan just before noon on the day of the murder, so that Shreyan could get his money converted. Tongo drove him to the place with a lower conversion rate than the hotel. Vinod said he rang to get hold of Annie, but Shreyan answered the phone and said he was in fact at the market changing some money over. Vinod thought nothing of it and just asked that she call him back later. Tongo professed that Shreyan took him outside the Surfside restaurant on the night of the murder and wanted to know if he had arranged for the guys. Tongo confirmed that everything had been arranged. As they began to drive into Guggulatu, Tongo said that he and Shreyan exchanged several text messages. It was alleged that Shreyan had told him the cash was in an envelope in a pouch behind the front seat. Police said that the texts and calls between the pair were corroborated by cell phone data analysis, but because Shreyan's phone was never located, the contents of the messages will probably never be known. It was a media frenzy, and nobody knew what to think. If this plea deal was to go ahead, it meant that Annie's family had to be consulted, and they were faced with a difficult and gut-wrenching decision. But her family all ultimately agreed for Tongo to accept it, and as confused and devastated as they were, they said they just wanted the truth about what had happened to Annie. The amount of public attention that Annie's case was getting was even more clear to see when the court cases started. The story was huge and getting more surreal by the day. Shreyan and his family vehemently denied all the claims, saying it was completely ridiculous and lacked any evidence at all. Shreyan's lawyers, two of the most powerful and successful in the country, said that it just seemed incomprehensible that he would have asked the first person he met in Cape Town to carry out a hit on his wife, and it just made no sense for the state to be suggesting it. They said the evidence didn't actually prove anything. A little over a month after Annie had been killed, Zola Tongo was jailed for 18 years after making a plea agreement. Mond and Quabe soon followed suit, and would both start pointing the finger at Shreyan Duani too. Quabe would also be offered a reduced sentence which he would accept in exchange for a guilty plea and his promise of a testimony against Shreyan and any other criminal proceedings related to the crime. He was subsequently jailed for 25 years. Menjini was not offered any kind of deal, and he would later plead not guilty in court. Authorities said there was no point in offering him a plea deal because he couldn't have taken them any further with the case than anyone else involved. Menjini had his trial pushed back as he underwent surgery for a brain tumor, but he was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life in prison. It is difficult to imagine the absolute terror and horror that she must have endured when she stared down the barrel of the gun. Although from a relatively poor background, did not commit this offense due to poverty or his dire socioeconomic circumstances. This crime was perpetrated out of pure greed. It was very difficult to digest that, but at the same time, one glimpse of happiness was that he never said at any point that my daughter was abused. And that was something we really can live on. The full picture will only emerge when Shreyan comes down to Cape Town. Lawyers for both Quabe and Menjini said their clients had been abused, even tortured by the police, because authorities were so pressured to solve such a high-profile case. The police denied all the allegations. Hotel receptionist Monday admitted to his involvement, but he was granted full immunity from prosecution in exchange for his promise of a truthful testimony against Shreyan. Something which left many shocked, considering he had been the one to make the call to Quabe and arrange the hit. Monday said, "I want to state it here that Mr. Duany is lying. He knows everything, from the beginning to the end." Shreyan would soon find himself arrested in Bristol on suspicion of conspiring to murder Annie, and South African authorities were now fighting to extradite him. But despite what the men were saying, there still didn't appear to be any motive. People said he wouldn't have gained anything from Annie's death financially, as there was no life insurance policy, and by all accounts there didn't appear to be any issues within the couple's relationship. But an interview with the Sun newspaper was later published, which gave the South African police a potential motive if Shreyan was involved. Anonymous emails had been sent to the Sun suggesting that Shreyan was gay, and people alleged that he had been paying a male prostitute for sex. His name was Leopold Laser, and was known to his clients as the German Master. Leopold told the Sun that Shreyan had confided in him that he was in a relationship that he needed to get out of. Shreyan and his family had maintained that this was all nonsense, and said that he was blissfully happy with his new bride. "I just married the girl of my dreams," he said. "Why would I want to kill her?" But police began speculating that perhaps Annie had found out during the honeymoon that Shreyan was keeping this potential secret about his sexuality, and this is what sparked the later events. One of the leading investigators said it had become the most publicized, most in-your-face case he'd seen in his 36 years on the job. Although Vinod fiercely fought back against anyone that suggested his son-in-law may have been involved, he later revealed that over time things had begun to eat away at him more and more. "I have spoken with my son-in-law, and there are far more questions than answers," he said. Many South African reporters and journalists agreed, and said that although the crime rate in the area was high, something just didn't add up. One reporter said that this was not a typical crime, far from it, and a big red flag had been that the car was just left there, rather than being burnt or sold on. Vinod said Shreyan would often give varying accounts of what happened that night, different times and different orders of events. One example being that Shreyan had told authorities Quabe and Menjini had taken all of Annie's jewelry, but after Annie was found, he phoned an officer to ask him to check his SIM in the back seat of the car. He said he would find Annie's £25,000 engagement ring in there, and sure enough, there it was. When he was asked why this wasn't in his original statement, Shreyan said he was in shock at the time, and now he wanted to amend the statement he had made. Shreyan had also thrown a pizza party the night before Annie's funeral, which Vinod said he found to be highly inappropriate and disrespectful. Annie's family recall that Shreyan was furious that they had gathered to say goodbye to Annie before she was laid to rest, and was very rough with her body when trying to dress her, something Annie's cousin said made her extremely uncomfortable. Her cousin also said that the letters and flowers the family had left with Annie's body ended up on the floor when Shreyan grabbed them and threw them down. Shreyan later apologized to the family and admitted he shouldn't have acted in that way. The Duany family hired Max Clifford to handle the overwhelming amount of attention from the press. Max Clifford was a well-known London press agent who had represented celebrities such as Muhammad Ali, Marvin Gaye, and Marlon Brando. Once well-respected and sought after in the world of PR, he had a huge fall from grace in 2014. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison after being found guilty of a string of indecent assaults against young girls. He would later die in prison after suffering a heart attack. While he was handling Shreyan's case, Shreyan's brother Prayan demanded that Annie's family sign an agreement that said they would not say anything to the media without consulting Max Clifford first. Vinod refused. Shreyan was sent to the Priory Hospital in Bristol and was said to be suffering from depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. Max Clifford said that Shreyan had lost 28 pounds since his wife's death and was getting weaker and weaker and weaker. Shortly after, he was detained under the Mental Health Act. I was speaking to Annie Dewani's family who live in Sweden, but they feel that the 4 people who are in the car, apart from that is Annie, all have questions to answer. Now, 3 of them have been found guilty by the South African courts. They now want Shreyan Dewani to turn up. He is, of course, fighting a legal battle against being extradited from Britain to South Africa. His psychiatrists say he's too ill to stand trial at the moment. He says he's suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome and depression following the death of his new bride. And also, he feels he won't get a fair trial here in South Africa. But Annie Dewani's family are absolutely insistent he will get a fair trial. They say they just want to hear the truth. And they've urged Shreyan Dewani to give up the fight and to allow himself to be extradited, to face trial and answer some questions here in South Africa. The extradition hearing of Shreyan Dewani, wanted in South Africa for questioning about the murder of his wife, has heard claims and counterclaims over how he'll be treated in prison if he is returned there. I had a family once upon a time, 6 months ago, which was different than what I have today. Why? For the past 3 days, the Hindatja family, who've traveled from Sweden, have sat through an extradition hearing at Woolwich Crown Court. The South African authorities want Shreyan Dewani, Annie's new husband, to stand trial over the alleged contract killing of his bride in a Cape Town township last November. Much of the extradition hearing is centered on whether South African jails are dangerous, brutal places, on whether Shreyan Dewani would survive if he was sent there. And as far as the Hindatja family is concerned, this hearing should not be happening at all. If he says he's not involved in anything, he should probably go to South Africa and say, "I didn't do it, here I am, just give me a trial." Due to his mental health issues, Shreyan's extradition hearings were pushed back and put off for a long time, but they finally began at Belmarsh Magistrates Court in London. Annie's uncle said, "We don't understand why Shreyan doesn't simply get on a plane and go and tell his side of the story." Annie's brother said, "We are just focusing on this case at the moment, and it is hard to even start making the grieving process final yet, because there are so many questions we need answers to." The Home Secretary and later Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Theresa May, signed an order for Shreyan to be extradited to South Africa. We are satisfied with the decision today made by the British justice system, but it's still a long way to the answers that we are looking for. And we don't want to forget Annie in this. For us, it's all about Annie. It's all about finding out what happened to her, and we will fight this battle to the end. And this battle has just begun for us. Shreyan entered a plea of not guilty to all 5 charges brought against him, and the trial would be set. This is the moment that Shreyan Dewani, the millionaire businessman based in Bristol, began his involuntary acquaintance with South African justice, for years after being accused of plotting the murder of his newlywed 28-year-old wife, Annie, on their honeymoon in Cape Town. Shreyan pleaded not guilty to the 5 charges against him, but he also surprised the court. Through his lawyer, he went on to say that he was bisexual, that he'd had encounters with male prostitutes, and he had abnormally low hormone levels, which meant it was unlikely that he could ever have children. The prosecution is expected to argue that the murder was linked to a sham marriage meant to hide Mr. Dewani's true sexual identity. In his defense statement, Shreyan Dewani admitted their relationship was turbulent. An email from Shreyan to Annie Dewani, written before their wedding, was read out in court. "If you really think being with me is not going to make you happy, then this is not right for you. I really hope that that is not what you are saying, but I don't want to feel like I have forced you into something." On the first day of his trial, the court heard more about his sexuality, and in a written statement read out by his lawyers, Shreyan said that despite his previous denials, he was actually bisexual. Annie's family spoke of their disappointment of not knowing this about him, and said they were prepared to sue him for not being honest with them. A list of omissions released by the court also showed that Shreyan had been looking at gay porn and dating websites on the honeymoon, and just hours after Annie's body was found. The prosecution said that this, combined with the statements from the German master Leopold and several others, clearly showed that Shreyan was conflicted and desperate to hide a big part of his life. They argued that this wasn't about his sexuality per se, Rather, it was about the conversations in which he had disclosed his desire to get out of the marriage. Dewani tried hard to fight back his tears, but broke down in the dark as this footage was shown. His lawyer, Francois Francel, says this show of affection contradicts the state's allegation that Dewani plotted his wife's murder. Hendricks has hit back, saying Dewani's intentions may seem what he calls nice to the naked eye. But he says Dewani withheld crucial information, including telephonic communication with shuttle driver Zola Tongo on that evening. He says this adds something sinister to Dewani's version. Judge Jeanette Traverso listened to both sides and ultimately ruled that the evidence about Shreyan's sexuality was inadmissible. More witnesses came forward on behalf of the prosecution and said that Shreyan and Annie's relationship, no matter how perfect it might have looked, was far from it. Annie's cousin recalled that Annie had spoken to her just after the wedding and expressed her worry about whether a big mistake had been made in marrying him. Annie sent numerous text messages to her cousin saying things like, "Hate him," and "fighting a lot with Shreyan, told him I'm going home, wish I had never got engaged." A particularly sad one read, "Crying has become my new hobby." Just one day into the honeymoon, Annie sent another message saying, "Really trying, he's a really good guy in all ways, but I don't feel happy with him at all." Others said any disagreements the pair had were totally normal and very trivial, and it's possible the stress of planning such a big wedding had left Annie tired and feeling more emotional. The state's star witness was Zola Tongo, and police and prosecution said that the entire case rested on his testimony. He was the only person that could testify to the alleged conspiracy, having been the only one to speak with Shreyan. A lot of CCTV footage was shown to the courts. One clip showed Tongo and Shreyan talking in the hotel lobby just a day after Annie was killed. One of the cleaners could be seen in the frame as well. Shreyan talks to the cleaner for a second, and Tongo said that this conversation was Shreyan asking him to give the person privacy. After the cleaner leaves, Shreyan allegedly asked Tongo if the job had been done. Tongo said he warned Shreyan that there was a camera right above them. Shreyan looks up and stares at the camera for a second before looking away. Shreyan said that this was a totally innocent conversation. More footage was played out. It showed Shreyan and Tongo meeting in the hotel again. Shreyan, who had been sat with Vinod in one of the rooms, can be seen carrying some sort of white envelope or package. Tongo follows him to another room, away from Vinod and other guests, and then leaves with the same package. Shreyan then returns empty-handed, and Tongo leaves the hotel and heads back to his car. The state said they believed this was the money that had been promised for the hit, but Shreyan's lawyer said that the money was simply for his services as a driver. Some said this made total sense. Others questioned if this was the case. Why did the exchange of money take place in a private area, off-camera and away from Annie's father? Taxi driver and convicted murderer Zola Tongo has branded Shreyan Devani as a liar. Tongo concluded his testimony against the British businessman in the Western Cape High Court today. He spent 7 days on the witness stand, 5 of them under grueling cross-examination. Shreyan Devani's version of events, leading to the November 2010 murder of his wife Annie, has been described as nonsense and lies. Tongo is the man who fingered him as the mastermind behind his wife's murder. Defense counsel Francois Francel today continued his barrage of questions. Tongo remained adamant that Devani offered 15,000 rand to have his wife killed. The British businessman has denied all charges against him, including murder. Tongo also described as a lie the defense's assertion that a fellow prisoner would testify that Tongo told him he was advised to frame Devani for the murder. Tongo's version in court, and what he had told police in his affidavit in November 2010, also came under fire from the defense. Tongo was initially very confident on the stand, but when it came time for the defense's cross-examination, his version of events started to change. His story was showing more and more contradictions. At one point, he claimed the police must have added things into his statements without him knowing, which was why he was getting confused. Tongo, Mond and Quabe were all found to have committed perjury when their testimonies showed differing versions, and they admitted to not telling the truth in parts of their affidavits. This threw everything about the already confusing case into question once more. One can understand a witness contradicting himself in certain regards, or maybe even not saying exactly what he said in his witness statement to the police initially. But if these differences are serious and are material, then it has a major impact on their reliability and credibility at the end of the day. The defense's case was getting stronger by the day, as the state's case and their star witness began to crumble. On the 23rd day of Shreyan's trial, His lawyers requested that the judge throw out the case on the basis that they deemed it to be massively flawed. This was all before Shryan had even taken to the stand himself. For years after the murder of Annie Dywayne, Judge Jeanette Traverso gave a statement. She came down hard on the prosecution and criticized their case against Shryan. She said that the statements of the key witnesses were full of contradictions and ordered that Shryan Dywayne be found not guilty. In my view, the evidence presented in this case falls far below this threshold. In the circumstances, I make the following order. The application in terms of Section 174 of the Criminal Procedure Act is granted. The accused is found not guilty in this charge, and Mr. Malambo is not granted indemnity from prosecution. Court will adjourn. If he's not guilty, then good luck to him. He should be coming home. He should be allowed to come home. But if he has in any way in his mind I was complicit in this, then he should stay there. What sort of welcome back will he get? I don't know really. I shouldn't think it's going to be a great one because, it carries a lot of feeling, and this was a very, very, very sad and very tragic case. Very sad. Well, it's going to be very tough for Annie's family, but he's been found innocent. So, you have to go by what the law states. And I believe, if he's coming home, it's the right and proper thing. Shryan said, "It is the evidence of these proven liars that led to a witch hunt against me and the resulting failure to pursue the truth of what happened that night." Annie's family were devastated. They said they felt they had been let down by the justice system and that Annie had been let down too. After Shryan's exoneration, Annie's family asked for the coroner's court in the UK to reopen the inquest into her death, which would compel Shryan to publicly answer questions. Coroner Andrew Walker said there was insufficient cause to start an inquest, and he was prohibited from reaching a conclusion that was inconsistent with the findings of the South African courts. A formal complaint was lodged against Judge Traverso amid allegations of bias, with many feeling that Shryan should have been made to take the stand and give evidence. She would later be cleared of these claims. Menjini, who was still suffering from a brain tumor, eventually died in prison. In breaking news, convicted honeymoon murderer Quilal Menjini has died. Menjini is the only South African to go on trial for the murder of Annie Dywayne in Guguletu in 2010. He was 27 years old. During his trial the following year, the court heard that he had a life expectancy of only 5 years. Correctional Services officials said there was nothing more doctors could do for him. Leopold Lacer, the man that had told the papers about his secret relationship with Shryan, was said to have been suffering from tremendous stress due to the court case. Sadly, in 2016, he took his own life. According to news reports, as of 2018, Shryan was still living in the UK with his boyfriend of about 18 months at the time. In 2021, after serving half his sentence, Zola Tongo was up for parole. Annie's father and uncle went to speak with him in prison before his scheduled release. They said they showed him a picture of Annie, and he was emotionless, unaware of who it was. When they explained who she was, he started crying. Both men said that they weren't satisfied that it was genuine emotion, and that he didn't feel remorseful for what he had done, only that he was a very good actor. His parole was then withdrawn a day before his release. The murder of Annie Dywayne is a polarizing case, and one that continues to haunt her family. Many think that it was a completely random carjacking that either intentionally or unintentionally ended in murder. Everything that happened in between is purely coincidental, and anything seemingly pointing towards Shryan is unjust, unfair, and lacks evidence. Some think that it was planned, but by Zola Tongo, when he saw the glamorous couple with their expensive luggage and belongings, he saw an opportunity to kidnap Annie and use her as part of an extortion plan that ended up going horribly wrong. But others believe that Shryan masterminded the whole operation and got away with an atrocious crime. Annie's family and friends are still seeking answers, and things only get tougher for them the more that time passes. Annie's uncle said, "Still today we don't know exactly what happened. That brings a lot of uncertainty. Guessing what happened and knowing what happened are two different things. We want to know what happened. The conflicting stories and accounts from so many means the full truth of what happened that night, how it came to be, and what, if any, connection the 5 men had on that fateful night back in 2010 will likely never be known."